A burned dog walks into court. Then something unthinkable happens. The judge didn't look up at first, not when the whispers started, not even when the doors creaked open. But then came the sound no one expected to hear in a courtroom. A single bark. Low, gentle, steady. Every head turned. A German shepherd, limping on 3 legs, made his way down the aisle, scars visible, gait uneven. When he saw the man in chains, he wagged his tail, and the courtroom, filled with fury and judgment, suddenly fell silent. This is the story of that bark, and the man who had given up on life, and the dog who wouldn't let him disappear without being seen, truly seen one last time. You think you know what justice looks like? Wait until you meet Blitz. The wind knifed through the pine valleys of Frost Hollow like something alive, cold, dry, merciless. It howled down the mountain slopes and slithered between the boarded windows of the old mill town, whistling through alleys and under eaves, as if searching for something forgotten. Officer Nathan Hale sat alone in his patrol cruiser, parked on the shoulder of Route 16, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the whiteout blur beyond the windshield. The dashboard heater wheezed like an asthmatic smoker, barely warming his gloved fingers. Outside, snow swept sideways under the pale glare of the midnight moon, painting the world in shifting gray. It was the kind of night that made most men grateful to be inside. But Nathan wasn't most men. He hadn't felt warm in years, not since Afghanistan. Not since the night sand turned red and the only thing that saved him wasn't a person, but a dog. A dog whose name he never learned, whose eyes he never forgot. He blinked and turned the radio knob up a notch. A country ballad flickered in and out with static. Then came the dispatch voice, soft and half-buried beneath the interference. All units. Code clear. Snow advisory still in effect. Routine. Frost Hollow didn't do excitement, especially not at midnight on a Tuesday. But that was the thing about silence. Sometimes it wasn't peace. Sometimes it was a warning. Nathan leaned forward, scanning the darkness. The world outside looked like it was holding its breath. Then he heard it. At first, he thought it was a mechanical pop, maybe ice cracking on a roof. But it came again, sharper this time. A second pop. Then, a low, guttural roar. He sat bolt upright. The cruiser's tires groaned over the ice as he turned off the highway, instinct steering him down a narrow service road that snaked toward the edge of town. A crumbling gas station sat there long abandoned, its signs rusted into unreadable relics. Locals said the place hadn't pumped fuel in a decade. But now, through the whipping snow and brittle trees, Nathan saw it. A flicker of orange light, rising and writhing like a living thing. Fire. He gritted his teeth and punched the accelerator. The cruiser fishtailed once before gripping the frozen dirt. As he drew closer, the shape of the station came into view, its windows boarded, walls tagged with graffiti, and a sagging loading dock half-eaten by vines. The flames licked the side of the building, dancing along wood and oil stains like it had found an old friend. Nathan slammed the brakes and threw open the door. The heat hit him first, sharp, surreal, completely wrong against the cold. Then came the smell. Burning plastic, old gasoline, and something worse. Fur. He ran. His boots crunched over snow and gravel, lungs tightening from the smoke. For a moment he thought it was just debris, maybe some vagrant trying to keep warm and it got out of hand. But then he saw it. A shape, low to the ground, writhing. His heart stuttered. A dog. German shepherd. Bound in rope, body half covered in flame. Its muzzle low, eyes wild with terror. One flank was blackened, and its tail, a thing of singed bone and fur, still tried to wag, feebly, rhythmically, like muscle memory, refusing to surrender. "Oh God, no," Nathan whispered, already unzipping his parka. He didn't think. He just moved. Jacket off. He dropped to his knees and slammed it over the flames. The dog cried out, a sound so raw and human it cut through him. But there were no teeth, no fight, just pleading. Nathan grabbed handfuls of snow and pressed them into the fur, blistering his own skin as he smothered the fire with bare, shaking hands. "Easy, boy. Easy. I've got you," he murmured, over and over. Not sure if he meant it for the dog or for himself. Smoke clawed at his lungs, made his eyes sting. Sparks bit his forearms where the jacket had opened. The rope was charred, but still tight. Whoever had done this hadn't meant for escape. Nathan's fingers fumbled with the knots, heart pounding in his ears. The fire finally surrendered. Silence fell, not peaceful, but eerie. The kind that lives after something terrible. The dog collapsed sideways, legs twitching, breath shallow. Nathan reached beneath its body, feeling only bone and heat. He looked into the dog's eyes. Amber, wet, not with aggression, not even fear, just confusion and pain, and somehow still trust. Nathan's throat tightened. "You held on," he whispered. "So I will too." He cradled the dog heavier than it looked, a mass of scorched muscle and trembling nerves, and stumbled back toward the cruiser. Somewhere behind them, a shadow darted into the trees. Nathan saw it, coat flapping, face hidden, but made no move to chase. Not now, not with a life gasping in his arms. Snowflakes drifted around them as he placed the dog on the back seat, turned the heater to high, and wrapped both of them in the emergency blanket. The dog shifted slightly, just once. Its tail thumped weak, but deliberate, and Nathan Hale blinked hard. Outside, the snow kept falling. The old gas station crackled faintly behind them, giving up its last breath to the night. He didn't know the dog's name, didn't know why this had happened. But somewhere deep in the center of him, where old scars lived and war still whispered, he knew one thing with unbearable clarity. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Nathan didn't remember opening the car door, didn't remember grabbing the fire blanket or slamming the cruiser shut. All he knew was the sound, a sound no living thing should ever make, slicing through the wind and setting something ancient inside him ablaze. The flames ahead moved like a breathing thing. They curled around the rotting wooden frame of the loading dock, rising in sudden, erratic bursts. But it wasn't the fire itself that froze Nathan in place for half a second. It was what lay inside it. A dog, German Shepherd, muzzle bound low, legs jerking weakly. Its fur had blackened in patches, and the skin beneath was bubbling raw and red and screaming without sound. A nylon rope cut across its ribs and back legs like a cruel joke, and yet its tail moved. Not frantically, not spastically, just one soft wag, a gesture that should have belonged to a dog welcoming home its person, not one dying alone in fire. Nathan's lungs caught. The wind shifted, driving smoke into his eyes and gasoline into his nose. He stumbled forward, dropping to his knees, jacket already half off. "Jesus, Jesus, no, hang on, buddy, hang on." He hurled the parka over the dog's midsection. Flames hissed and flared. Nathan pressed down with all his weight. His hands sank into scorched fabric, searing heat piercing through the sleeves. The fire clawed at his fingers, hungry, as if angry he'd interrupted the feast. The dog cried out, a sound between a whimper and a scream. Nathan's vision blurred. He grabbed handfuls of snow from the ground and shoved them beneath the jacket, into the fire's belly. Steam erupted. Smoke boiled in his face. The rope! The damn rope was catching fire now. Nathan tore off his gloves and reached for the knot, his skin meeting plastic that had begun to melt and fuse. He couldn't see clearly. His hands screamed with pain, but he kept pulling. The dog's eyes met his glazed, frantic, but still lucid. Not a wild animal's stare, not even a panicked one. Just a look that said, "Please, please, not like this." He worked the knot until the rope snapped with a muffled pop. Bits of smoldering fiber fell away, smoking in the snow. The dog collapsed fully to its side, ribs rising and falling in ragged gasps. The left hind leg twitched, then stilled. Nathan could smell fur. Burnt leather. Something deeper. Darker, the scent of betrayal in the open air. "You're okay now," he lied, pressing snow against the back flank where the fire had eaten deepest. "You're okay. You're okay." The flames were gone, but they'd left their mark. Charred patches crisscrossed the dog's back and tail like a map of hurt. Large patches of fur had disintegrated entirely. The skin beneath was raw, glistening, pulsing like a wound that still remembered what it once was. Nathan looked at his own hands, blistered red. Skin curled at the knuckles. He felt none of it yet. The dog lifted its head an inch, then let it drop again. And then somehow its tail moved. A single thump against the ash-dusted snow. Slow, meaningful, as if to say, still here, still trying. Nathan's throat locked. His eyes burned from more than just smoke. He reached beneath the animal's midsection, careful not to touch the exposed skin, and lifted. The body was heavier than he expected, muscle gone soft from neglect, but still solid, still real. The dog groaned low in its throat, but didn't resist, didn't bite, didn't flinch, just leaned, as if giving Nathan the weight of what remained. He staggered back toward the cruiser, boots crunching, breath hitching. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, backup finally responding to the fire call. But they were still minutes away. And the dog didn't have minutes. Snow fell harder now, as if trying to cover what had just happened, to bury the cruelty beneath a fresh white lie. Inside the car, he cleared the back seat, ripping open the emergency blanket with his teeth, wrapping it as best he could around the dog's smoldering sides. He turned the heat on full blast. The vents blew stale, dry warmth into the space. The dog curled into himself, trembling. His paw pressed against the seat, then slid, slick with soot and blood. Nathan sat beside him, one arm wrapped tight around the bundle of smoke and bone. "You're gonna make it," he whispered. The dog's ear twitched. "Barely. Don't quit on me now. Not after what you've survived." He said it like a prayer, not because he believed, but because maybe the dog still did. Outside, the fire sputtered and died. The roof of the old gas station groaned and caved inward with a muffled crash. The world went quiet again. Nathan looked down. The dog's eyes were closed, but the tail moved once more. A soft flick, a breath, a choice. And Nathan Hale, burned and shivering in the dark, made a silent vow right there in that cruiser. This dog would not die without knowing that someone still believed in him. Not tonight. Not ever. The cruiser creaked as Nathan settled into the driver's seat, door shut tight against the wind. The heater moaned. Old, overworked, but it pushed warmth out into the cab like a stubborn breath. He glanced into the back seat. The dog was curled against the upholstery, a trembling shape wrapped in the frayed emergency blanket. The smell of burnt fur still clung to everything: his jacket, the seats, the inside of his throat. The dog groaned softly, not in protest, more like the kind of sound a body makes when it remembers it's still alive. Snow began to fall harder now, heavy flakes sticking to the windshield and melting into long streaks. Nathan turned on the wipers. They scraped with tired defiance. Outside, Frost Hollow was silent. No porch lights, no movement. Just a town caught in winter's chokehold, pretending nothing bad ever happened after dark. Nathan shifted into gear. The tires bit into slush and pulled them forward. The road ahead curved like a memory he hadn't visited in years. "Just hold on," he said quietly, more to himself than to the dog. He kept one eye on the mirror. The German shepherd's breathing was shallow, ribs rising and falling beneath the blanket. Blood had seeped into the fabric at the corners, black in the dim light. But what startled Nathan more was the stillness. Not frozen, not lifeless. Just surrendered. Like the dog had stopped expecting help a long time ago. Nathan reached back, his fingers brushing the edge of the blanket. The dog didn't flinch, didn't move, but its eyes blinked slow, deliberate. Not afraid, just tired. He recognized that look. He'd seen it in the mirror after his first tour, in hospital beds, in other soldiers' eyes when the dust finally settled and the adrenaline drained, and all that was left was the ache of still being here. Still breathing when someone else wasn't, 5 can. Still carrying weight that didn't belong to you. "You shouldn't be alive," Nathan murmured. The dog's ear twitched. "But you are." And that meant something. He gripped the wheel tighter, feeling the sting in his palms, where the fire had kissed him. The adrenaline was fading now, pain bleeding in. Skin bubbled along the inside of his thumb. His knuckles were raw, but he didn't care. The road ahead vanished into a tunnel of swirling snow, headlights cutting a narrow path through the storm. It was 10 miles to the edge of town, 12 to the clinic. He pressed the accelerator. The cruiser rumbled forward, tires crunching against black ice and salt. The dog shifted once, curling tighter beneath the blanket, emitting a faint, broken whine that barely filled the cabin. Nathan swallowed hard. "You're safe now," he said. "I promise." He didn't know why that line cracked something inside him. Maybe it was the word safe. a word he hadn't said in years without feeling like a liar. He glanced back again. The shepherd's eyes were closed, but its body still trembled in tiny, helpless jerks. Nathan turned the heat up, reached for the thermal flask in the passenger seat, unscrewed the cap with one blistered hand, and held it back. Here, just a little warmth. Not much, but better than nothing. The dog didn't lift its head, but its nose twitched, catching the scent of metal and faint coffee. Nathan smiled, just slightly. You've got fight in you. He hadn't smiled in weeks. The last time he'd felt anything even close to hope was a long time ago when a different shepherd dragged him across a ravine in Kandahar, muzzle bleeding, ignoring gunfire and command, only focused on saving him. That dog had no name either, just a tattoo on the inside of his ear and a handler who never spoke. Nathan had never found out what happened to him. But tonight, something stirred in his chest that felt familiar. The way the fire still flickered in this dog's eyes, even when he could barely move. The way he didn't growl, didn't fight. He just endured. Nathan blinked hard and focused back on the road. The snowstorm was thickening. The tires groaned around a sharp curve. Frost Hollow's water tower loomed in the distance like a ghost, barely visible through the white. The dog let out another groan, but this one ended differently. A tail moved. Once. Twice. It wasn't random. Nathan's foot eased off the gas. The cruiser rolled forward slowly, silence pressing in all around them. "I saw that," he whispered. "You're still here." Another wag. Slower, but deliberate. That was when it hit him. Not like a revelation, but like a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, finally released. "You held on," he said, the words catching in his throat. He looked down at his burned hands, the jacket ruined, the heat barely holding in the cab, and the snow falling like a benediction. "So, I will too." He didn't need to say more. The dog's eyes flickered open amber in the dark. They locked with his for a beat too long to be coincidence. And something passed between them. Not words, not even understanding. Just a quiet agreement between two living things that had almost given up and didn't. Nathan pressed the gas again. Ahead, the sign for Hollow Ridge Veterinary Clinic gleamed faintly through the snowfall. Almost there, he reached back once more and let his fingers rest lightly against the dog's side above the ribs that still moved, above the heart that still beat. The tail wagged again, even weaker than before, but it wagged. And as they drove on through the falling snow and into whatever came next, Nathan found himself whispering not to the dog, but to himself. "Just keep breathing, buddy. Just keep breathing." The old gravel lot behind Hollow Ridge Veterinary Clinic crunched under the cruiser's tires like frozen bones. Snow swirled in the headlights, thick now, relentless. It blurred the horizon, turned trees into shadows, and time into something suspended. Nathan parked under the skeletal arch of an old maple. The building ahead loomed like a barn reborn, a sloped roof, faded red siding, and a warm yellow light spilling out from a single window near the back. The sign above the door had been hand-carved. Dr. Alara Voss, DVM. Below it, someone had painted the phrase, "We treat those who can't ask for help." He killed the engine and sat for half a breath longer than he meant to. In the rear seat, the dog stirred a shudder more than a movement. The emergency blanket had shifted during the ride, revealing a blackened patch along the hindquarters. Skin that had once known warmth now blistered under the weight of cruelty. Nathan opened the door. The cold sliced into him immediately. Wind hissed through his coat collar as he stepped out, boots sinking into a crust of snow. He opened the rear door and crouched low. "Almost there," he murmured. The shepherd didn't lift his head, but his eye cracked open, just one meeting Nathan's for a heartbeat. Still here. Still trying. Nathan gathered him gently, feeling the dog's weight sag against his arms. The fur that hadn't burned was soaked in cold sweat and blood. The smell made his throat tighten charred fur, antiseptic from the blanket's lining, the faint tang of old gasoline still clinging to the skin. The kind of scent you never forget. The kind that settles into memory and doesn't leave. The clinic door opened before he could knock. A woman stepped out, framed in the soft glow of fluorescent light. She wore navy blue scrubs beneath a green thermal shirt, sleeves rolled up to the elbows despite the chill. Her auburn hair, streaked with silver, was pulled into a tight braid, and a pair of glasses hung on a cord around her neck. She didn't speak right away. Her gaze moved from Nathan's scorched hands to the limp, blood-stained dog in his arms. And in that instant, Nathan knew two things. She'd seen this before, and it never got easier. "Hilaire Voss?" he asked, voice hoarse. She nodded once. "Bring him in, now. No pleasantries. No questions. Just command." He followed her through the double doors into warmth and light. The clinic smelled of iodine, hay, and heat, the comforting musk of animals and antiseptic. But underneath it all lingered something raw, the burnt ghost of fur and fire that trailed behind them like a shadow. The space had been converted from what was once a horse barn. Heavy beams ran along the ceiling. A potbelly stove radiated orange heat in one corner, casting slow-moving shadows across metal cabinets and supply bins. In the center, beneath a surgical light that hummed faintly, stood a stainless steel exam table already prepped. Hilaire snapped on a pair of gloves with the ease of repetition. She didn't ask how it happened. Not yet. She just pointed. "There." Nathan laid the dog down gently. The shepherd whimpered, barely audible, but Hilaire heard it. She moved quickly, examining the burns, her fingers deft but gentle. She pressed 2 fingers under the jaw, listening, then over the ribs, then behind the ears. "Name?" she asked. "I don't know." She didn't react, just nodded as if that too was familiar. "How long ago?" 15, maybe 20 minutes since the fire went out. I put it out myself." Her eyes flicked to his hands, raw, blistering. "You didn't have gloves." "Didn't have time." Another nod, another piece cataloged. Hilaire leaned in and sniffed, her jaw clenched. "Gasoline." "Yeah." She turned, began preparing tools, scissors, gauze, syringes, IV bag. Nathan stood frozen, hands curled at his sides, unsure of what to do with them now. The room buzzed around him, metal trays, humming lights, the low growl of a generator out back. But the loudest thing was the silence. The kind of silence that clung to people who had witnessed things they couldn't unsee. "You were military," she said without looking. He blinked. "What?" She nodded toward his boots. "Lace pattern. That and the way you're standing like you're waiting for orders." Nathan swallowed. "Yeah. Army? You?" "Field medic. Iraq. Ramadi. Then Fallujah." Their eyes met. It wasn't camaraderie. It was recognition. She turned back to the table. "I'll sedate him first. Then we'll shave back the burn line and assess exposure depth. He's going into shock, but he's fighting it. That's good." Nathan nodded slowly. "Can I stay?" She hesitated, then nodded. "As long as you stay out of the way and don't faint." "I don't faint." She looked at his hands. "But you bleed." He gave a faint, bitter smile. Hilaire moved around the table with practiced ease, slipping a catheter into the front leg, setting up the IV. She hummed under her breath, a tune that might have once been a lullaby or a hymn, now reduced to breath and memory. Nathan stepped closer. The shepherd's chest rose in shallow waves. His face was a mess of soot and dried blood, but his ears twitched at the sound of Hilaire's voice. He wasn't gone yet. "Does he have a chance?" Nathan asked softly. Hilaire's gloved hand paused over the syringe. "I've seen animals come back from worse, but it's not just his body. It's his will. If he gives up..." She didn't finish. Nathan looked at the dog again, looked at the blistered paw, the twitching ear, the tail barely visible under the blanket, and he shook his head. "He didn't give up," he said. "Not even when the fire touched bone." Hilaire didn't answer, but her voice softened a little as she injected the sedative. "You're right," she murmured, more to the dog than to Nathan. "He didn't, and as the German shepherd's breathing slowed into something deeper, pain held at bay by medicine and hands that remembered how to heal the room fell still. Not empty, not yet peaceful, but no longer alone. The clippers buzzed low, steady in Hilaire's hand as they moved over the shepherd's scorched flank. Most of the fur there had already been lost to fire, singed into brittle curls or gone completely, leaving blistered skin that puckered and peeled in uneven patches. But she had to be precise. Burn wounds could hide deeper rot beneath what the eye could see. And if infection had already begun to set in... She didn't finish the thought. Nathan stood across the room near the cabinets, bandaging his hands with gauze. Alara had tossed him earlier. He hadn't spoken in several minutes. Neither had she. The only sound in the room was the quiet mechanical buzz of the clippers and the softer, more intimate sounds of the shepherd breathing faint, shallow, like every inhale was a decision. The air still smelled of smoke, of something burned that wasn't just flesh. Alara leaned closer, her gloved fingers pressing gently along the ribcage. "You're lucky," she murmured to the dog, voice low. "Or maybe just too stubborn to quit." Ender raised. The shepherd didn't move, but his eye flicked once toward her, then closed again. She began trimming further back, toward the shoulder. The skin there was dry, charred in places but not deep. Some fur still clung to it, coarse and matted with soot. She clicked the blade into a finer setting and eased the clippers against the curve of the shoulder blade. Then she saw it. At first, it looked like a shadow, a smudge beneath the grime. But when she dabbed it with a saline pad, it didn't come away. She blinked and leaned in, wiping gently again. A faint outline began to emerge beneath the layer of ash. Letters, numbers, blurred but unmistakable. She pressed another cloth against it, her breath catching. "Nathan!" she called, voice steadier than it felt. He looked up from the sink, halfway through tying off the gauze on his right hand. "Yeah? Come here." He crossed the room, boots quiet on the tile. "What is it?" She stepped aside just enough for him to see. Beneath the shepherd's soot-streaked fur, etched faintly into the skin above the left shoulder, was a military tattoo. The ink had faded, the lines softened with time and trauma, but the imprint remained Alpha 79. Nathan stared. He didn't speak, just stood there, hands at his sides, the air shifting around him. "Alpha Unit Designation," Alara said softly. "Military K-9 Protocol. The numbers are identifiers, usually specific to the batch, the mission set, and the training cycle." Nathan didn't move. "Not just a working dog, then," she added. "A soldier." His jaw clenched. "Yeah," she glanced at him. His face had gone pale beneath the lines of ash and exhaustion. "You know what this means?" she asked. "I do." "Special Forces?" He nodded once. Alpha units were typically assigned to recon, explosives detection, and deep field support. Dogs like this weren't just trained to obey. They were trained to anticipate, to save lives. Alara looked back at the shepherd, whose breathing had slowed but remained even. She felt something stir in her chest, something that came before words, before logic, a quiet, painful reverence. "You've been through war, haven't you?" she whispered. The dog didn't stir. But something in the room shifted, as if silence itself acknowledged the weight of his name, even before it was spoken. "Do you know who he belonged to?" she asked Nathan. He hesitated. Then, "Not yet, but I will." Alara studied him. There was something different about his posture now, less defensive, less rigid, as if seeing that marking had rearranged something inside him, not just memory, but obligation. "They usually don't end up like this," she said gently. "Dogs like him, I mean. They get retirement ceremonies, medals, folded flags, unless they're lost," Nathan said, "or left behind." His voice had no anger, just the hollow weight of someone who knew too well how the system worked and how it sometimes didn't. Alara turned and wet another cloth, pressing it along the edge of the tattoo. The skin flinched slightly under her touch. "I've treated rescues," she said. "Fighting dogs, strays, but this is different." Nathan stepped closer to the table. His eyes, he said. Back at the fire, he looked at me like he trailed off. "Like he was waiting for someone?" Alara offered. He nodded. Alara met his gaze. "They always wait," she said. "Longer than they should, even after everything." Her hand brushed behind the shepherd's ear, where the fur was still intact. He didn't react, but his pulse, under the skin, remained steady. For now. Nathan ran a hand down the front of his uniform, where the smoke had left streaks of black. "Alpha 79, he murmured. Alara's brow furrowed. "What?" "I served with an Alpha unit once. Afghanistan. 2019. One of their dogs pulled me out of a ravine during a mortar hit. I never saw his face. Just teeth, fur, and the feeling of being dragged to a place where I could live. Ilara stared at him. You think this is the same dog? I don't know. But his voice said otherwise. She turned back to the table. The shepherd exhaled a slow, shallow breath. Ilara pulled the blanket up higher around his side and whispered something soft. Not a command, not even comfort, just presence. Then she looked at Nathan. Find out who he is. Find out who left him. Nathan nodded once. I will. And in that small room, beneath a buzzing surgical light and the fading scent of fire, the weight of forgotten war pressed in. But so did something else, the beginning of a name, the start of a story neither of them had expected to find in the snow. The room had quieted, but not in a way that brought peace. It was the kind of stillness that followed revelation, the lull after a curtain had been pulled back, exposing something too real, too heavy to speak over. Nathan stood near the examination table, staring down at the faded tattoo on the shepherd's shoulder like it had punched a hole through time. Alpha 79. A designation, a legacy, a door to something buried. Ilara moved silently to a nearby cabinet and retrieved a small handheld scanner, matte black, no larger than a cordless razor. The screen flickered blue when she pressed the power button. She glanced at Nathan without speaking, just a subtle shift in expression that asked, You ready? He nodded, though he wasn't. She stepped closer to the shepherd still unconscious, breathing thin lines into the blanket, and ran her gloved fingers gently over the upper shoulder blades, parting what was left of the fur. The skin there was tougher, less burned. The place military dogs were typically chipped. The scanner beeped softly as it swept the first pass. Then again, and then a longer tone. Beep, beep, beep. The screen lit up. ID matched. Name, Blitz. Designation, Alpha 79. Handler, Zgraint, Michael Redden. Status, retired K9. Dodd, certified. Last logged handler contact, classified. Ilara stared at the display, the glow reflecting in her glasses. She read the name aloud, slowly, like saying it too quickly might collapse something fragile. Blitz, she whispered. Handler, Sergeant Michael Redden. And Nathan Hale stopped breathing. Ilara didn't look up right away. She didn't have to. The change in the air was immediate, as though someone had opened a vault in the room and let the past spill out. When she finally turned, she saw it in Nathan's face, the kind of stillness that doesn't come from shock, but from recognition. His hands were at his sides, one wrapped in gauze, the other curled into a trembling fist. You know him, she said quietly. Nathan didn't answer. Not at first. He just stepped back from the table, blinking as if trying to unsee the name. Then, Michael Redden saved my life. Ilara stayed still, letting the weight of the sentence settle. Kandahar, 2019. We were pinned in a canyon south of the compound. Intel got scrambled. They sent our unit into a dead zone without knowing the Taliban had already dug in. His voice had dropped into something lower, strained. Each word carried its own bruise. We were surrounded within 5 minutes. No cover, no air support. It was a slaughter. He exhaled. Slow, bitter. I got hit. Left side. Shrapnel tore through my chest and shoulder. I remember thinking I was already dead. Ilara didn't speak, just watched. Listened. Nathan looked down at Blitz, who lay curled on the table like a battlefield ghost. Then this blur came out of nowhere. A dog. Big. Fast. Smoke all around. He didn't bark. Didn't panic. Just grabbed me by the gear strap and started dragging. His eyes flickered not to Ilara, not to the table, but somewhere distant. Somewhere still on fire. I thought I was hallucinating. I couldn't move. I passed out before we made it to cover. When I woke up, command said I'd been pulled out by a special forces handler. One of theirs. They said he didn't stay long enough to identify. Just dropped me and went back in. He swallowed. That handler was Redden. I never saw his face. Never thanked him. Until now, I didn't even know the dog's name. He looked down again. Blitz. Ilara's voice came carefully. Do you know what happened to them? Nathan shook his head. Number. After I got discharged, I tried looking. Military red tape. K9 unit records are harder to access than most. I figured they were reassigned, or gone. His voice cracked. But I never imagined this. He stepped closer again, his hand hovering above the dog's back. To find him here, in this shape, in this place. He couldn't finish. Ilara set the scanner down gently on a metal tray. The beep still echoed in the silence, like a heartbeat slowing down. This wasn't just a dog tied to a post, she said softly. This was a soldier left to burn. Nathan's jaw tightened. Which means someone did this to cover something up, or worse, out of desperation. Ilara's eyes met his. Redden. Nathan didn't respond, but the weight in his silence spoke for him. Ilara looked back at Blitz. Do you think he's still alive? Nathan's answer was immediate. Yes. How can you be sure? Because Blitz found me, he said. And dogs like this, they don't forget. If Redden was anywhere nearby, Blitz would have gone to him first. Or maybe, he stopped. Maybe he already did. Ilara's expression tightened. Then what happened? Nathan stared at the dog. That's what I need to find out. He turned to the scanner. The name glowed back at him in digital blue. Blitz, Handler, Sergeant, Michael Redden. The same man who'd saved him. The same man who, if the pieces were right, had somehow become the reason this dog lay half dead on a table under fluorescent lights in a town that didn't even appear on most maps. You think he did this? Ilara asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and caution. Nathan didn't blink. I don't know, but if he didn't, he sure as hell was close enough to let it happen. They both looked at Blitz again. His body barely moved under the blanket, but his ear twitched at the sound of his name. Nathan stepped closer. He placed a hand gently, reverently on Blitz's paw. The skin was rough, partially burned, but the weight was still there. Solid. Real. You saved me once, he whispered. Let me return the favor. Outside, the wind blew harder against the windows. Snow lashed sideways across the glass like ash refusing to settle. Inside, beneath the buzz of machines and the steady drip of fluids, a soldier, man and dog alike, began to remember what it meant to fight for something again. The clinic lights buzzed low overhead, but Nathan barely noticed them. He sat in the far corner of the recovery room, elbows on his knees, bandaged hands clasped tight between them. Outside, the wind continued its slow sweep through the snow-laced town of Frost Hollow. But inside, everything had gone quiet. Too quiet. Blitz lay on the steel table across the room, sedated, wrapped in layers of gauze and silence. IV fluids dripped rhythmically into his foreleg. Monitors blinked. A soft beeping marked every heartbeat. Nathan closed his eyes, and the clinic disappeared. He was back there again, Kandahar, 2019, the desert, stinging his face like glass, the air thick with copper and smoke. It had been 112 degrees that day. Dry heat, the kind that made your teeth ache. His unit had been ordered into a valley west of Shah Wali Khat, a recon sweep after suspected insurgent movement near the pipeline corridor. Intel was supposed to be clean, supposed to be safe. It wasn't. He remembered the first pop, the sound of a detonation triggered by remote, the kind you didn't see coming, just felt. A flash of orange. The ground beneath him split like a scream. Then came the gunfire. Short, rapid bursts, controlled. They had the high ground. He remembered turning, trying to call it out. Contact Northwest Ridge! But someone else was already down. Blood sprayed onto the side of the Humvee. The radio clipped to his vest screeched useless static. Then everything went sideways. Shrapnel tore through his shoulder like a blade. He hit the dirt hard, rolled down the incline into a dry creek bed that smelled of gunpowder and oil. His ears rang. His breath came in stutters. He tasted sand, couldn't move his arm. Couldn't scream. Couldn't think. There was yelling above. Then more gunfire. Somewhere distant voices. Orders. Panic. He saw movement through blurred vision. A figure scrambling over the ridge. Not one of theirs. He reached for his sidearm and couldn't lift it. That was when he saw it. At first, it didn't register a blur of tan and black cutting through smoke and noise. Low to the ground. Fast. Intentional. A dog. He wasn't barking. Wasn't afraid. Just running toward him, muzzle low. Eyes locked in. Nathan had thought he was hallucinating. That maybe this was death, and the form it had taken was some kind of memory made flesh. But then he felt it, teeth gently but firmly closing on the drag strap of his vest. The pull, one tug, then another. The shepherd planted his paws into the sand, muscles tight, and dragged him, inch by painful inch, toward the shelter of the vehicle hull. Bullets snapped overhead. Sand erupted. Someone was shouting. The dog didn't flinch. Nathan tried to lift his head, tried to speak. He remembered his own blood dripping into the animal's fur, remembered locking eyes with him for a single second. Not a dog's eyes, a soldier's. Everything faded after that. He woke up on a cot 4 hours later, sedated, wrapped, and half drained. They told him someone had pulled him out. A Special Forces K-9 unit had been running a covert sweep in the area. The handler had no time to stay, no name left behind. Just dropped Nathan under the protection of cover and vanished back into the smoke. They said it was a fluke. Nathan muttered aloud now, his voice barely more than breath, that I got lucky. He opened his eyes. The clinic came back into focus. The soft, antiseptic scent. The muffled ticking of a wall clock. The rise and fall of Blitz's chest. Not a fluke. A dog had pulled him from hell once, and tonight, Nathan had done the same. I never knew your name, he said, rising to his feet. He approached the table slowly. Blitz lay still, but not lifeless. His tail had moved once during the night, a soft twitch, a muscle memory perhaps, or something deeper. Nathan wanted to believe it was the latter. You saved me, and I didn't even know who you were. He rested his hand gently on the edge of the table, just beside the shepherd's paw. I should have found you, should have tried harder. Guilt moved through him like a storm cloud, heavy, slow, familiar. He'd left the army 3 months after the ambush, medical discharge. His shoulder had healed, but something inside hadn't. He buried the past in routines, moved states, took a quiet job in a town where people didn't ask too many questions. But that day never left him. Not entirely. And now, that day had come back wrapped in fire and fur, and lying unconscious in a converted barn clinic on the edge of nowhere. Michael Redden, Nathan whispered. The name felt foreign on his tongue, sharp with history and dust. The man who had commanded Blitz, the man who had saved him once, and now, the man who might have betrayed his own. I don't know what happened to him, but I'm going to find out. Nathan looked at the monitors, then at the metal tag clipped to Blitz's IV collar, a temporary identifier until something more permanent could be assigned. But now the dog had a name, a history, a reason. Blitz, he said softly. I remember now. No. The dog stirred. Just faintly a twitch of the back paw, a shift in breathing. Nathan stepped back, his throat tightening. You held the line, even when the war came home. He didn't know if Blitz could hear him, but the words weren't for the dog alone. They were for the younger version of himself, buried beneath layers of desert dust and silence. For the soldier who once knelt in a ditch thinking he would die. For the man who survived and forgot how to live. Outside, the wind calmed. And inside the clinic, something else did too. Not healed, not yet, but remembering. And that was the first step. The snow had stopped by dawn, but Frost Hollow remained wrapped in its own kind of hush, the kind of stillness that doesn't come from peace, but from exhaustion. Inside the clinic, the overhead lights had dimmed to a softer tone. Most of the machines had quieted now, leaving only the slow metronomic beep of the heart monitor beside the recovery table. Blitz lay swaddled in fresh gauze and medical blankets, an IV line running along his leg, his muzzle resting gently on the edge of a towel. His breathing, though shallow, had steadied. Nathan sat on the floor beside the table, his back leaning against the cabinet, arms draped loosely over his knees. He hadn't said much since the last time the vet tech came in. He hadn't needed to. The silence in the room had grown companionable. Not comfortable, exactly, but honest. Across from him, Alara stood by the window, her fingers curled around a chipped ceramic mug. Steam rose from it in lazy spirals. She wasn't drinking it, just holding it. Like the warmth might give her something words couldn't too. You ever name a dog that wasn't yours? Nathan asked suddenly, voice soft. Ilara didn't turn right away, but a small smile touched the corner of her mouth. All the time, he nodded. I called him Blitz before I knew. That's what his file says. Blitz, Alpha 79. She glanced down at the sleeping dog. He looks like one. Yeah. Fast. Fierce. But still. Steady. She finally turned and crossed the room, sitting down beside him. They were shoulder to shoulder now, facing the table, the quiet filling in where conversation failed. I don't usually sit on floors, she said. I don't usually talk to people, he answered. They both let out a short, low laugh, not from humor, but from the absurd honesty of it. Nathan rubbed the gauze on his left hand, wincing slightly. The burns had blistered deeper overnight. He hadn't bothered to mention it. Not yet. Ilara, he said after a pause. Why this place? She followed his gaze. The clinic? Yeah. You could have gone anywhere. Tss. She was quiet for a long beat. Then, because nowhere else wanted me, he looked at her. But she didn't meet his eyes. I got out in 2016, after Jared died. Nathan didn't speak, but something inside him stilled. He was my fiancé, she said. Marine Corps, Force Recon, quiet guy, the kind who listened more than he spoke. She set the mug down on the floor beside her. Her fingers were shaking slightly now. We met in triage outside Mosul. He had a shoulder wound. I had a bleeding heart. You know how those things go. Nathan nodded, slow. Ilara's voice lowered. He made it back, on paper anyway. But the war didn't stay there. It came with him, in little ways. Loud noises, short breaths, the way he'd stop in the hallway like he was waiting for an order that never came. She swallowed. He held on for 2 years, and then one morning, he didn't. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Like standing beside a gravestone no one else could see. Nathan finally asked, Did he leave a note? Yes. What'd it say? She looked at him. That he was tired. That he felt like a ghost in a world of noise. That the only thing that ever made sense was the dog they worked with overseas. Nathan's brow furrowed. He mentioned the dog? She nodded. Said the only one who ever really knew him didn't speak. Just sat beside him when the nightmares came. Blitz, I think. Same unit, same rotation. Nathan stared at the sleeping shepherd. The edges of coincidence were narrowing into something else entirely. Maybe that's why I didn't hesitate when you brought him in, Ilara said, more to herself than him. I looked in his eyes and it was like Jared was still here. In a strange, quiet way. Nathan looked down at the floor. I've lost men too. Guys I served with. Close ones. He rubbed the scar beneath his collarbone. But it's different with dogs. They don't let you blame the world. Or yourself. They just stay. She nodded slowly. Even when it hurts. He glanced over at her. You ever blame yourself? All the time. For not seeing it coming? For not being enough. He nodded again. You? Yeah. They fell quiet once more. Outside the window, the first blue light of morning crept over the rooftops of Frost Hollow, painting the snow in cool shadows. Somewhere in the distance, a lone crow cawed, sharp against the hush. Inside, Blitz exhaled a small, wheezing breath, not pain, but release. Like even in sleep, he was beginning to trust the warmth again. Ilara reached over and brushed her fingertips along the edge of his uninjured ear. You think he dreams? She asked. I hope so, Nathan said. I hope it's somewhere quiet, somewhere soft. No orders, no guns, no fire. They sat there for a while longer, just two people who had loved and lost in different ways, kept alive by duty, ghosts, and the quiet grace of a dog who had no reason to trust again, but did. Finally, Ilara stood. I'm going to check his vitals again, then maybe sleep. You? I'll stay a little longer. She hesitated. You sure? Nathan looked at Blitz. He waited for me. I can wait for him. And as Ilara moved to her notes, Nathan reached out, placed his hand gently beside the dog's paw. No words, no promises, just a shared silence. And in that silence, something began to heal. Morning came slow to Frost Hollow. Pale light spilled across the hardwood floor of the clinic like a shy guest, hesitant to touch anything broken. Snow still lined the windowsills, unmelted, as if even the sun wasn't sure if it was welcome yet. Blitz was stable, not healed, not out of danger, but breathing, fighting, still here. Ilara stood beside the table, her gloved fingers gently checking the IV line for bubbles. She moved with quiet precision, the kind that only comes from repetition or from tending to things others couldn't bear to. Nathan sat nearby again, this time on a low stool, close enough to hear every breath Blitz took, every soft twitch of his paw. "How's he doing?" he asked, voice still hoarse from a night without sleep. Alara didn't answer right away. She reached for a cotton swab and dabbed near the edge of the larger burn across Blitz's hindquarters. "He's in more pain than he shows," she said finally. Nathan nodded slowly, watching the way Blitz's ribs rose and fell. "You said last night you've treated dogs like him before." "I have," Alara replied. "But not many." She peeled back a layer of bandage gently and sprayed a cool antiseptic mist over the exposed skin. Blitz flinched, but only slightly. His eyes fluttered, then closed again. "Dogs like this," she said quietly, "don't scream when they're hurting. They don't lash out. Not because they're fine, but because somewhere in their training they learned that pain doesn't mean stop. It means keep going." Nathan looked down at his hands. "Like soldiers." "Exactly like soldiers." She glanced at him now, her face softened by the kind of sorrow that comes from knowing too much. "I've seen animals limp for weeks before someone noticed they had a bullet lodged behind the shoulder. I've seen them stand guard on torn ligaments, eat through nausea, bark commands through broken jaws." Nathan said nothing, but his jaw tightened. "Pain, to them, isn't the enemy," she continued. "Being useless is." Blitz stirred faintly. One ear flicked toward the sound of her voice. Nathan leaned in. That's why he didn't run when he saw the fire. Alara nodded. He didn't think he was allowed to. She began to clean the area behind Blitz's ear, wiping away soot and grime that had settled into the folds overnight. Her touch was reverent. "This isn't just trauma to the body," she said. "This is trauma that lives under the skin, in the muscle memory, in the way he tenses when someone enters the room, the way he still listens for orders in his sleep." Nathan's eyes traced the curve of Blitz's spine, the burn marks that zigzagged like fault lines, deep, discolored, irreversible. "I should hate Redden for this," he said softly. Alara paused, her hand hovering over Blitz's side. "But you don't." Nathan shook his head. "I don't know what I feel. I just know something doesn't add up." He leaned forward slightly. "When I picked him up, when the flames were still burning, he wasn't afraid." "Of you?" "Number of what was happening. He didn't fight me, didn't try to run. He looked me in the eye like he was waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For someone to tell him it wasn't the end." Alara studied him for a moment, then turned back to Blitz. She whispered something, not words, more like a sound, a breath shaped into comfort, a pressure without force. Then Nathan noticed it. Blitz's ear twitched again, but not toward her this time. "Did you say something?" "No," she said, glancing at him. Nathan leaned a little closer. "Michael." At the sound of the name, Blitz's nose twitched. Nathan sat back, blinking. "Wait," he tried again. "Michael." This time, Blitz's eye opened. Just one, amber and tired and ancient, but it opened. Alara looked down, stunned. "That can't be coincidence." "It's not." Nathan leaned forward. "Michael," he said, voice soft, almost apologetic. Blitz's tail moved. Not a wag, just a shift, a faint scrape of fur against blanket. Still, it was enough. Alara let out a slow breath. "Even after all this, he still believes," Nathan whispered. The room fell silent. It wasn't disbelief that held them quiet. It was reverence. That unspoken awe when you witness something unbreakable loyalty that shouldn't exist, and yet does. "Do you think he saw who set the fire?" Alara asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I think," Nathan said, "he already knew." "Oh." They sat with that thought for a moment. "It takes a certain kind of trust to stand still in fire," she murmured. Nathan looked at Blitz again. "Or a certain kind of love." Alara folded her gloves and placed them on the tray. She didn't look up as she spoke next. "I used to think people like Redden were either heroes or cowards, that you were one or the other. And now? I think some people are both." Nathan nodded slowly. "You think he meant to hurt him?" "I think he meant to disappear." Blitz let out a long, trembling exhale. Nathan reached out and touched the side of his paw. "You stayed," he whispered. even when he couldn't. The clinic lights buzzed softly above them. Outside, the morning wind had calmed. Frost Hollow lay quiet in its blanket of snow, unaware that something sacred had just stirred in the bones of a broken dog. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something close. The snow hadn't melted, but something about the air had changed. Nathan stepped out of his cruiser, boots crunching against the half-frozen gravel near the old gas station. The place looked just as it had 2 nights ago, gutted by flame, choked in silence. Smoke no longer hung in the air, but the scent of burned plastic and scorched memory lingered like a bruise under the wind. He didn't know what had pulled him back here. Logic had nothing to do with it. Some things weren't about logic. The fire had started near the back wall, where 2 collapsed beams now crossed like broken arms. Nathan scanned the edges of the lot, slow and deliberate. He didn't need evidence. He needed answers. The kind that don't fit into a report. The kind that live beneath guilt. He crouched by the blackened patch of ground where he'd first seen the flames dance across Blitz's fur, where the smell of gasoline had stabbed through the night like a knife through cloth. He touched the edge of the snow line, now half melted, revealing char patterns in the gravel. And then he saw them. Boot prints. Not his. Too wide for his tread. Heavy, older military issue. The kind worn down by years, not months. He followed them slowly, not in a straight line, but staggered. Like someone had paced, waited, fought with themselves, and stopped. Just near the edge of the wall, tucked between a fallen piece of plywood and an overturned crate, lay a folded square of something warped and blackened. Ash clung to the edges. Nathan reached down, careful not to tear it. The paper cracked as he opened it, but the handwriting, somehow, had survived. 4 words, scrawled in trembling black ink, smeared at the edges by heat and maybe tears. "Forgive me, I couldn't." That was all. But it hit Nathan harder than a bullet. The script, it wasn't neat, but it wasn't random either. Familiar, like a half-forgotten signature from another life. Not one he could name, but something in his bones stirred. Afghanistan. The heat, the smoke, the cracked voices on comms, the way certain men wrote letters home, they'd never send all of it washed over him like a wave too dark to fight. He knelt in the snow, the letter limp in his hands. "I've seen this before," he whispered to no one. Or something like it. His fingers closed tighter around the edges. He remembered the mission. Kandahar, 2019. The ambush, the chaos. The man who saved him, the man who stayed behind while Nathan bled into the dirt, dragging himself out with the help of a dog whose name he hadn't known until last night. Michael Redden. Nathan had only seen him up close once, long enough to know his voice. Never enough to know his handwriting. But this, it felt like him. The slant of the letters, the sharp drop in the G, the way the M curled inward like it wanted to hide. Nathan stood up slowly, snow brushing off his knees. He looked around again, not like a cop now, but like a man staring at the remains of a prayer gone wrong. A gust of wind picked up ash from the collapsed beams, swirling it into the sky like smoke that hadn't gotten the message yet. He turned back toward the prints. They didn't lead far, just to the edge of the lot, then vanished into the trees. No tire tracks. Whoever left them didn't drive here, or didn't intend to leave. Nathan traced them until they disappeared into soft snow under the tree line. He stopped there, let the silence wrap around him. Somewhere, a crow called once hoarse and alone. He held the note again. Read it a second time, then a third. "Forgive me. I couldn't what? Kill Blitz? Save him? Stay?" Nathan's breath left him in a shudder. For a second, the snow didn't feel cold. Just empty. He tucked the note into his coat pocket and stared into the woods beyond. There was a pain in this story bigger than the crime. Something old and messy. Something stitched together by duty and unraveling by despair. He could feel it pulling at the edges. Not just Michael's story. His too. Nathan closed his eyes and whispered into the stillness. "I don't know what happened to you, but I think you still care." The wind didn't answer, but something in him shifted the same way Blitz had responded to Michael's name. Not with certainty, but instinct. Some wounds call to each other across distance. He turned back toward the cruiser, boots sinking deep. There was one thing he was sure of now. This wasn't an attack. It was a surrender. And someone, somewhere, was still waiting for the fire inside them to finally burn out or be forgiven for letting it consume too much. As he slid into the driver's seat, the snow began to fall again, light and almost hesitant. Nathan glanced at the note once more before starting the engine. Then he whispered, as if Michael could hear, "I'm going to find you." And he meant it. The hum of the fluorescent light above flickered like a nervous habit Nathan couldn't ignore. He sat alone at the back corner of the Luna County Sheriff's Station, long past midnight, the rest of the building silent except for the low crackle of the wall heater behind him. Outside, the snow had thickened into a white silence, but inside, the past was waking up. He hadn't touched his coffee. The terminal in front of him, an old federal access unit still tied into interagency databases, required 4 layers of clearance. 2 of them had expired. One had barely remained valid through a quiet favor from a friend in D.C. What he was doing wasn't protocol, but some ghosts don't wait for permission. He typed in the name slowly, not like a search, but a confession. Redden, Michael J. Rank, SGT, US Army. Service ID, 9072147XX. The screen paused, then blinked once. Files populated. Then a flag appeared. Restricted access. Mental health record sealed. Nathan's jaw clenched. He reached deeper past layers of firewalls, into back doors left behind by Homeland Security updates no one cared about anymore. Bits of his old training from his time embedded with field intel teams came back like muscle memory. He whispered under his breath, steadying fingers that had once dialed airstrikes and signed death reports. Finally, the file unlocked. A cold breath escaped him. There was a photo first. Michael Redden, age 34, strong jaw, gray eyes. Standard regulation haircut, but the expression was not standard at all. Not for a man still in uniform. A looked lost, like someone had carved out the part of him that smiled and left the rest standing at attention. Nathan stared at the image longer than he needed to. He hadn't remembered Michael's face, but now it came rushing back not from a photo, but from the edge of a firefight. A man shouting through chaos, dragging a wounded soldier from the mud. A dog running ahead. A promise kept in silence. Beneath the photo, the service summary began. Operation Steel Mantle, Kandahar, 2019. Unit, Tres Serie Recon Tactical, Special Forces Adjunct. K9 Handler, Alpha 79. Blitz. Nathan swallowed hard. Blitz had a handler. A partner. It really was, Michael. He scrolled further. Service record, 2012. Afghanistan deployment. 2015. Advanced Recon Qualification. 2016. Wounded in Operation Silverthroat. 2018. Commendation for Valor. 2019. Incident. Ambush in Sector K7. 2020. Behavioral Evaluation initiated. 2021. Dishonorable discharge. Cited failure to comply with psychological protocols. 2021. Location unknown. Presumed missing. Flagged as potentially unstable. Note: subject did not return issued service K9. Nathan leaned back, the seat creaking beneath him. He kept Blitz. Through it all, even after being cast out. A man discarded. A dog unreturned. Not stolen. Not taken. Just held on to. Like the last piece of a world falling apart, the deeper he read, the darker it got. Michael had failed 3 psych evaluations. Symptoms of complex PTSD, paranoia, disassociation, survivor's guilt. Notes from a military therapist mentioned hallucinations involving fire, recurrent flashbacks of burning structures. One entry stood out. Patient exhibits strong emotional tether to K9 unit, refuses separation. States, "He's the only one who didn't lie to me." Nathan exhaled. There it was again, loyalty as lifeline. Blitz wasn't just a dog. He was Michael's last thread to reality. The only soul who knew every scream of the war and didn't turn away. But what had happened? How do you go from protector to setting the one you love on fire? Unless you weren't trying to kill him. Unless you thought he was already gone. Nathan's hands trembled as he printed out the flagged summary. The final line read like a stone carved by regret. Disposition. Unfit for civilian reentry. Subject refused transfer to VA mental health facility. Case closed. He stared at that line like it owed him something. Unfit. Not broken. Not guilty. Just discarded. That's how the system closes its eyes. Nathan reached into his coat pocket and unfolded the scorched note again. "Forgive me, I couldn't." It matched. Same slant in the letters, same curling M. He held it beside the service file printout and knew without forensics, without doubt, this was Michael's handwriting. His old rescuer, Blitz's partner, the man who vanished when the war came home. Nathan sat still for a long time. Somewhere inside, the scar tissue of survival tugged open again. He remembered being 23, bleeding out in a trench of sand and bone, screaming through cracked lips, and then pause, breath, teeth on his uniform pulling him. Blitz. And the man behind the dog was this man. Not a criminal, not a monster, just a soldier who was never allowed to come home. Nathan's voice cracked when he whispered, "You don't deserve to disappear." He knew what he had to do now. Find Michael Redden. Not to arrest him, not to punish him, but to answer the letter no one else ever would. The clinic had gone still for the night. The hallway lights were dimmed to a golden hush, casting soft shadows across white tile and metal cabinets. Somewhere, a heater clicked, releasing quiet warmth into the silence. Blitz lay curled in a thick fleece blanket, breathing deep and steady for the first time since the fire. His bandages were fresh, and a faint smell of salve lingered in the air, medicinal, but strangely comforting. Nathan stood by the window, one hand braced on the sill, eyes lost in the snow falling beneath the porch light outside. Every flake seemed to drift in slow motion, quieting the world, blanketing it in something that resembled peace, but wasn't. Behind him, soft footsteps approached. "You didn't come here just for him," Ilara said quietly. Her voice didn't accuse. It didn't demand. It understood. Nathan didn't turn. "I don't know what you mean," he murmured, though his tone already betrayed the weight he carried. "I think you do," she replied, gently but firmly. "You're not just saving a dog. You're chasing something. Or someone." Nathan closed his eyes. His jaw clenched as he whispered, "Michael Redden." She waited. He turned, slowly. His shoulders slumped from exhaustion, but his gaze clear for the first time in days. "He saved my life once. In Kandahar. I didn't even know his name. All I remembered was a man dragging me out of fire, and a dog, breathing hard, eyes locked on mine like he knew I wasn't done yet." Ilara's expression softened. She leaned against the counter beside him, arms crossed, but her posture loose open. "Now I know. It was them, Blitz and Michael." He swallowed. "They didn't just pull me out of the ambush. They kept me alive after. Michael would talk to me when I couldn't speak. Blitz would sleep against my leg so I wouldn't shake through the night. And then one day, they were gone, rotated out. I never got to say thank you." Ilara glanced toward the recovery room where Blitz rested. "You think Michael started that fire?" "I think," Nathan hesitated, "I think he's not well, and I think he didn't mean to hurt Blitz. The note, it wasn't cold. It was broken, guilty." He pulled the scorched paper from his pocket, unfolding it slowly, reverently. "Forgive me. I couldn't." Ilara traced the edge with her eyes, but didn't touch it. "You think he believed Blitz was already gone?" "I don't know what he saw," Nathan said, voice low. "But I know what I owe him. You don't have to carry that debt." He looked at her, really looked, and something behind his eyes flickered to life. "But I do. Not because anyone told me to. Because I was supposed to die in that hole, Ilara. I should have died. And now that I'm here, and Blitz is somehow still here after what he went through, I can't just patch him up and walk away. That would be betrayal." Ilara looked down at the floor. For a moment, she didn't speak. When she did, her voice trembled with something unspoken. "My fiancé came home from Mosul. He lasted 6 months. Every night, he'd sit at the edge of the bed and stare at the wall like there was something only he could see." Her hands folded tightly in front of her. "He used to hold a dog tag in his fist until it left a mark on his palm." Nathan nodded. "Quiet. One morning, I woke up and he wasn't there," she continued. "Not just physically. He left a note on the back of our grocery list." She smiled bitterly. said, "I'm not coming back. Don't try to fix me. I couldn't fix him. I wasn't enough." Silence swelled between them, not heavy shared. "I think that's why I keep fixing animals," Ilara whispered. "They don't lie about their pain. They don't pretend. They just survive. Or they don't." She looked up at him again. "So, if you're going to find him, do it for the right reasons." Nathan met her gaze. "This isn't justice I'm after. I'm not wearing a badge for this. I want him to know he's not forgotten, that Blitz is still alive, that someone remembers." A long breath passed between them. Ilara stepped forward, placed a hand on his chest, not romantically, but as someone grounding another back to the earth. "Then find him, but bring something more than guilt." "What?" "Bring hope." Her voice was so gentle, it nearly cracked something open inside him. He looked over at Blitz through the window, the way his ears twitched, even in sleep, the way his paws still reflexively moved as if guarding something invisible. Despite the pain, despite the scars, he had not given up. "You held on," Nathan whispered again, more to himself than anyone. "So I will too." Ilara stepped back and moved toward a drawer. She opened it, pulled out a small tin, and handed it to him. Inside, a vial of burn ointment, a military ID tag she'd found hidden in Blitz's collar, and a folded map marked with a dot near the edge of the national forest, close to an old ranger outpost. "VA logs show a call made from that location 2 weeks ago," she said. "Anonymous. Disconnected before anyone answered. No voice. Just breathing." Nathan took it in his hands, fingers lingering on the edge of the dog tag. "Redden. M." There was blood crusted in the lettering. A shiver ran through him, but beneath it was resolve. He looked up at her and nodded. "I'm going." Ilara didn't try to stop him. Instead, she handed him a scarf, olive green, thick wool. "It gets colder out there than you expect, and ghosts don't give off much heat." Nathan smiled faintly. "Neither do old debts." The screen flickered. A grainy timestamp blinked in the corner, 5:02 a.m., 13 Fahrenheit. No audio. The footage stuttered once, then played. Ilara stood at the edge of her desk, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Nathan leaned forward, knuckles white against the table where the laptop glowed. The small office was dim, except for the light from the screen, cold, artificial. The silence in the room was not technical. It was emotional. Outside the frame of the video, snow fell in gentle waves, brushing the clinic windows like ash. "Here," Ilara said, her voice almost reluctant, like she didn't want to breathe life into what they were about to watch. "This was sent anonymously. I pulled it off the drive you found under the gas station register." Nathan gave a tight nod. His eyes didn't blink. The security camera angle showed the back alley behind the abandoned gas station. Chain link fence, rusted barrels, a broken ice machine. The world looked forgotten. And then, a figure entered frame. Michael. He moved like a man broken in places no one could see. His jacket hung off his shoulders, too large, like it belonged to someone else. Hair disheveled, gait uneven. In his arms, a red plastic container sloshed with movement. Nathan's breath caught. He hadn't seen Michael's face in over a decade. Now, captured in pixelated footage, he looked like someone halfway between a soldier and a ghost. Michael stopped, set the can down, looked at something off screen. From the shadows, Blitz appeared. The dog's gait was slow, not limping, just cautious, not out of fear, but out of understanding. "Blitz," Nathan whispered. The dog approached Michael, tail low but wagging faintly. Head tilted, ears back, body soft. Not a threat, not a question, just presence, loyalty, wrapped in fur and faith. Michael knelt. His hands trembled as they touched Blitz's face. The gesture was tender, like reaching out to a memory you thought was lost forever. He rested his forehead against the dog's. The moment held. Then it cracked. Michael's shoulder jerked, the gas can tipped. Liquid splashed. It wasn't thrown. It wasn't aimed. It was an accident, a tremor in his grip, a misstep of the mind. And Blitz didn't move. Even as gasoline coated his back and sides, even as it dripped from his ears and legs, Blitz stood, still, calm, trusting. Nathan's heart screamed, "Why didn't you run?" On screen, Michael stared in horror at what he'd done. He scrambled, frantically wiping at Blitz's fur, trying to undo what could not be undone. And then, the lighter. It slipped from his pocket. No violence, no anger, just gravity and madness. It hit the ground, sparked, and the screen bloomed white. Elara turned away. Nathan didn't. Blitz ignited. His body lit up like dry parchment. Flames danced violently across his back. But the dog didn't attack, didn't flee. He looked at Michael. Not with panic, with grief. And the camera caught it that split second of recognition. As if Blitz knew it wasn't malice. It was a man drowning, pulling everything down with him, and he chose not to hate him for it. Then the screen shuddered. Smoke choked the feed. Michael screamed, though the audio was silent, his body convulsed with it. He fell to his knees, grabbing at his own hair, rocking, pounding the pavement as if punishing himself. Blitz collapsed off-screen. The video cut to static. Nathan exhaled a sound more like a tremor than breath. He backed away from the table, shaking. Elara was crying silently, one hand pressed to her lips. "That wasn't a monster," Nathan said, voice hoarse. "That was a man at the edge. It—" She nodded slowly, wiping a tear away with the heel of her hand. "And Blitz, he never flinched. Not even once." Nathan sat down heavily, rubbing his face. The image burned into his brain. He trusted him. Even on fire, he trusted him. The weight of that truth crushed the air around them. Elara sat beside him. For a long time, neither spoke. Then she whispered, "There's a line between madness and memory. Some soldiers, they cross it without knowing. And sometimes the ones they hurt are the only ones who still believe in them." Nathan looked at her. "That's what Blitz is, isn't he? A believer, even now." She nodded, still waiting. Nathan reached into his pocket, pulled out the tag, read an M. The metal was still warm from being in his hand all day, or maybe it was just the fire he'd watched burn. He placed it on the table. Next to it, the map she gave him still folded, still pointing the way. "Do you still want to go?" she asked quietly. Nathan stared at the screen again, the static pulsing like a dying heartbeat. "Yes," he said, voice like steel wrapped in sorrow. Not just to find him, but to remind him who he was, who he is, before he forgets completely. He stood, reached for his jacket. Behind them, Blitz stirred softly in his bed. The faintest whimper in his sleep, not fear, not pain. A name. Nathan paused, turned, walked over. Kneeling beside him, he gently touched the bandaged shoulder. "It's okay, Blitz," he said softly. "I saw it all. You stayed. Now it's my turn." The dog's tail thumped once, weak but real. And somewhere in the silence between man and dog, forgiveness breathed not loudly, not in words, but in trust, still burning, but never broken. The phone rang twice before the dispatch line picked up, but no one answered. Not really. It was set to voicemail. Routine after-hours protocol. The LED light blinked faintly in the dark corner of the county dispatch office, a place that smelled of burnt coffee and disuse. No one heard it come in, not right away. It was only later, long after the snowfall had softened the world outside and Nathan had left for the tree line, that the night clerk played the message. What came through was not static. It was a voice, a trembling, human voice, breath-catching, like a wounded thing trying not to cry. "I didn't mean to." A pause, a shaky inhale. Then, "He found me when I was ready to disappear." The clerk leaned forward. The voice was male. Low, rough around the edges, but frayed with something deeper than exhaustion. It sounded like someone walking barefoot through memory, every word cut by what came before. He remembered me, even when I didn't, and I broke him." The clerk froze. Fingers hovered above the keyboard. "I don't even know what's left of me anymore." Another silence. The faint, metallic clang of a phone booth door blowing in the wind echoed faintly in the background. A gust of cold, a vehicle passing somewhere far away. You ever stand at the edge of something and realize you already jumped? You just didn't hit the ground yet? He sniffed. A hollow laugh followed the kind that sounded more like a sob pretending to be brave. That dog. Blitz. He wasn't just a mission. He wasn't trained to love, but he did. He chose me. Even after everything, he came back. I looked in his eyes and saw the part of me I buried, the part that believed people came home. And then, the breaking point. I set the world on fire, and he stayed. A long, drawn-out breath filled the line. You could almost hear the weight of snow outside the booth. Time didn't pass. It hung. "Tell Nathan." He paused. The breath trembled. "Tell him I remember Kandahar. The alley. The blood. The way he didn't scream. The way Blitz dragged him anyway. Tell him I'm sorry I didn't come back. I wanted to. But some ghosts, they don't fit back into daylight." Silence again. You could almost feel the words gathering in his throat like stones. If he still has the tag, if Blitz is still alive, maybe that's enough. Maybe not all of me has to disappear. And then, a click. Dead air. Message over. Nathan heard the recording 3 hours later. The snow had begun to fall heavier now, wind curling under the eaves of Alara's clinic like a whisper too close to the skin. He sat stiffly in her office chair, head set to one ear, jaw locked. Alara stood across from him, arms folded, face pale. She didn't interrupt. Not once. When the line went dead, Nathan didn't speak. He reached slowly into his pocket, pulled out the worn tag that read, Redden, M. The letters were faded now, but they still caught the light just enough to shimmer. His hand closed around it. "He thinks he's already gone," he said finally, voice low. "He thinks the fire burned away what was left of him." Alara knelt beside him. But Blitz didn't. Blitz saw him, stayed with him, even in the worst of it. Nathan nodded. "And he remembers Kandahar. He remembers that alley." He swallowed. "So do I. M." The image came back in shards, the concrete slick with blood, the screams swallowed by gunfire, and a dog's teeth around his vest, dragging him inch by inch through dirt and chaos toward survival. He never saw the handler's face. But now he had the voice. "Where's the call from?" Nathan asked, jaw tightening. Alara glanced at the call trace log. "Phone booth. Old gas station off Route 89, northbound. There's nothing out there but pines and thyme." He stood. She didn't stop him. That night, Nathan drove into the darkness. The roads were slick with ice. Moonlight fractured across the windshield like a broken memory. On the passenger seat, Blitz slept beneath a thick wool blanket, his body rising and falling in shallow, even waves. His burns still pained him. His eyes opened now and then, scanning the world not with fear, but with waiting. "Hang on, soldier," Nathan murmured. "We're going to bring him back." And outside, the wind picked up carrying the hush of snow and something older, something that sounded like the past wasn't done yet. Not until someone picked up the phone, not until someone answered. The clinic was quiet after Nathan left. Outside, the snow fell heavier now, clinging to the roof in thick silence, muffling the world like someone had laid a blanket over grief. Inside, Alara moved slowly through the office, cleaning up the remnants of a long, breaking day bloody gauze, surgical scissors, the faint scent of singed fur still hanging in the air like an accusation. She paused by the medicine cabinet, fingers resting on a vial she no longer needed. Her hands were steady, but her chest felt tight, like something old and unsaid had started to breathe again. The call from dispatch still echoed in the corners of the room. Michael's voice, his apology, his confession. And one sentence in particular had struck her like a nail through quiet glass. "He found me when I was ready to disappear." She had heard that phrasing before, not in the words themselves, but in the tone, that hollow tenderness, that haunted edge between love and surrender. It brought her back not to war zones or emergency clinics, but to a drawer she hadn't opened in years. Alara walked to the far cabinet, the one beneath the bookshelf. The handle stuck, just like it always had, and she had to jiggle it twice before it groaned open. Inside, a leather-bound journal, aged and cracked at the spine. A dog tag, a folded letter, yellowed by time, sealed with wax that had long since crumbled. She stared at the envelope. To E. Voss it read, "In ink no longer firm." Hands shaking now, she sat down alone except for the soft ticking of the clock and opened the letter. "Dearest Alara, if you're reading this, it means I didn't win the fight. Not the one out there with bullets and orders. The one in here, the quiet war, the one without maps. I tried, El. I really did. But something's wrong with the thread. There was this man Redden. You never met him. He was good, once, one of the best, but they pushed him too far. Same way they pushed Thomas. And when Thomas starts slipping, the rest of us will follow. I see it in their eyes, that faraway stare, like they're already saying goodbye. If Thomas falls, we all will. The way the dogs look at them, it's different. Like the dogs can see the expiration date before we can. I don't blame them. I blame the silence that wraps around soldiers when they come home. Like a flag that doesn't wave. Like a casket no one nails shut. Promise me, if you're ever holding one of them in your hands, a broken man, a broken dog, it doesn't matter, don't just patch their wounds. Ask them what they lost. Sit with it, even if it's ugly. Because that's the only thing that still scares me. Not the dying, El, but the forgetting. And you were always the one who remembered. Luca. Her breath hitched. She read it again. Then a third time. And by then, the tears came. Not loud. Not all at once. Just the kind that fall slowly, like they'd been waiting at the corners of her eyes for years, and finally found permission. Ilara folded the letter gently and stared out the clinic window. Somewhere out there, Nathan was driving toward a phone booth in the dark. Somewhere out there, a dog still believed in a man who had nearly burned him alive. And somewhere, buried under too many silences, was the truth. This wasn't just about Blitz, or Michael, or Nathan, or even Thomas, the man Luca had feared would fall. It was about all of them, the invisible thread connecting those who went to war and never fully returned. The thread that frayed with each name scratched off a deployment list. With each K-9 retired, forgotten, or buried. With each man who left the battlefield but couldn't leave the battlefield behind. She walked to Blitz's recovery room. He was asleep now, bandaged, breathing slow but even. The burns along his neck were healing, not fast, but better than expected. Nathan's jacket was folded neatly on the chair beside him, still faintly damp with melted snow. Ilara reached out and ran her hand gently over the dog's head. His ear twitched. "I remember now," she whispered. Blitz stirred, not waking, but as if he heard something not in the words, but in the weight behind them. "You're not the only one who stayed," she murmured. "And you're not the only one who still hopes." She turned toward the hallway and grabbed her coat. There were still pieces of the puzzle missing, and a name in that letter she hadn't heard in nearly 4 years. Thomas. The soldier Luca couldn't save. The man he feared was the first domino. She didn't know where the trail would lead, but she had a feeling this didn't end with Michael. The war had left its shadow in more places than anyone wanted to admit, and Ilara Voss was done being silent. The sirens weren't loud that morning. They didn't need to be. In a town like Larkridge, noise wasn't what drew people, it was the presence of something wrong, hanging in the wind like a rumor everyone could smell before it had words. They found Michael Redden just after dawn. He'd collapsed near the town's abandoned sawmill, half covered in frost, barefoot, his hands trembling as he tried to shield his face from a sun that hadn't yet risen. The deputies had their weapons out, but they didn't need to fire. He didn't run. He didn't beg. He just whispered, "Is he alive?" No one answered. They loaded him into the back of the cruiser, like someone loading a coffin, slowly, reluctantly, aware that something sacred or terrible had just been touched. Nathan stood just outside the station when the vehicle rolled in. He didn't speak at first, just stared. Michael looked thinner, bones poking at the collar of his coat, eyes bruised not by fists but by years. The beard was unkempt, streaked with white. But Nathan recognized him instantly, not because of the face, but because of the look. It was the same look men had after their third tour, or after holding a bleeding comrade's hand long past the moment it went cold. Haunted. Still alive. Somehow, but not always wishing to be. The townspeople gathered like crows. One voice cut through the icy air. "That's the one. That's the man who burned the dog." Then another. "He should be chained like the animal he tried to kill." It spread like kindling catching flame. The sheriff raised a hand. "Enough!" But it wasn't enough. Not here. Not anymore. A child maybe 8 pointed at Michael with wide eyes and asked, "Why would someone do that to a dog?" The answer, of course, was more complicated than anyone wanted to hear. Inside the station, Michael sat with his head lowered, hands cuffed. Blitz wasn't far resting in Alara's truck outside, unaware that the man he once trusted more than life now sat in chains. Nathan stepped into the room, alone. Michael didn't look up. For a while, there was just the ticking of the heater and the faint groan of winter pressing against the glass. Then Michael whispered, "I didn't mean for the fire to spread. I dropped the lighter. It wasn't supposed to go off like that." Nathan stayed quiet. "He walked to me," Michael added, voice hollow. Wagged his tail, like nothing had changed. And for a moment, Nathan saw it. Blitz, even with burns blistering across his back, had tried to trust. Even in that moment, even after gasoline and fire and betrayal, the dog had believed. Nathan's jaw tightened. Why? Michael finally looked up, and his eyes weren't violent, weren't cruel. They were lost. "I was going to disappear," he said. "Blitz followed me. Like always, he never stopped." He rubbed the cuffs against his palms, metal against skin. "You don't understand. The war didn't end. It just changed uniforms." Outside, the townsfolk weren't cooling off. Someone threw a rock at the building. It cracked the edge of a window, sent shards rattling like the end of a hymn. The sheriff locked the outer doors. Inside, Nathan leaned against the wall. "You remember Kandahar?" Michael asked suddenly. Nathan stiffened. "Ambush. South Ridge. You were hit. I told Blitz to pull you out." Nathan didn't speak. Michael let the silence confirm it. "You owed him your life. And now I broke him." There was no defense in his voice, just a worn resignation. The kind that no longer asks for forgiveness because it stopped believing it exists. Nathan crouched down, face level. "You think you killed him, but he lived. He's out there." Michael's eyes filled, not with tears, but with disbelief. "I thought I'd see him in flames." "You did," and he kept walking. Michael swallowed, then closed his eyes. "I should have gone first." Outside, the mob grew louder. Nathan stood. "They want a name to burn." Michael gave a hollow laugh. "Let him have it." Nathan walked toward the door, but before he left, he paused. "You're not the only one who's burned things you didn't mean to. But this time, maybe, you can help put the fire out." Then he walked out into the cold. Snow was falling again. And it wasn't the kind that felt peaceful. It was the kind that felt like a hush before a reckoning. The clinic lights had been dimmed, not because of exhaustion, though it hung over the room like a weight, but because Alara believed wounds didn't like harshness, not on skin, not in the soul. Michael sat in the small side room used for end-of-life discussions, though this time it wasn't a dog about to be put down. It was a man, barely breathing beneath the weight of his own history. Alara stood in the doorway, arms crossed, not in judgment, but to keep her hands from trembling. She'd heard the rumors. She'd seen the footage. And she'd seen Blitz still alive, barely, with his scarred back and soft eyes. She had touched the healing skin, heard the gasping whines in his sleep. She knew what trauma smelled like. It was the same in dogs as it was in men: copper, fear, and something older, something that refused to die. Michael didn't look at her when she stepped inside. "I'm not here to defend myself," he murmured. "Good," Alara said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't have to, because I'm not here to listen to excuses. A long pause stretched between them, the kind only two people who'd seen too much war could carry without flinching. "I thought I hated you," Alara said softly, stepping closer. "When I saw him Blitz burning and heard what you'd done, I wanted to see you punished, stripped, left to rot." Michael didn't respond. "But then," she continued, "he opened his eyes. And the first time he tried to stand, he didn't growl. He didn't snap. He looked for you." Michael's breath hitched. "Just once. He remembered you," Alara said. "Even after the fire, even after the betrayal, he remembered not the monster, but the man he trusted." Michael finally looked up. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't proud. They were hollowed-out wells of regret. "I broke him." "No," Alara said. "You broke you. Blitz." Her voice faltered just for a second, but she steadied it. Blitz waited for someone to call his name. Every time the door opened, he lifted his head. Not for Nathan. Not even for me. Michael turned his head away. "I'm not here to offer you absolution," Alara continued. "You don't get that. Not from me. Maybe not ever." She stepped to the small table beside the chair, where the burn report still lay. Photos, details, pain documented in clinical terms that failed to describe the real suffering. She placed her hand on it, then slid it across the table toward him. "But I trust that dog more than most people," she said. Michael blinked. "Why?" "Because pain doesn't lie in animals, and neither does forgiveness. Blitz is burned, blinded in one eye, half his body torn open, but he still waits. He still remembers the hand that fed him, the voice that praised him, the man he followed into gunfire." Michael closed his eyes. "And if he can remember that," Ilara said, stepping back, "then maybe there's something still worth saving." And the room went quiet again. But it wasn't silence born of awkwardness. It was reverent, like two soldiers laying down arms after years of holding them too tight. Michael finally spoke. "You lost someone, didn't you?" Ilara nodded slowly. "Thomas, my fiancé, Afghanistan, 2011. He didn't die over there, not at first. Came back. But the war followed him into our bedroom, into our dinners, into the way he looked at me like he didn't deserve the way I said his name. Cell." She inhaled deeply, eyes shining but not crying. "One morning I found a note. 'If Thomas falls, we all will.' That's all it said. Then he was gone." Michael looked down. "I remember that name. He served with us. 1st Recon, right?" Ilara nodded again. "You and he were stationed together." They let that truth settle, not as a dagger, but as a thread binding two fractures. "I hated you, Michael," Ilara said again, voice thinner now. "But Blitz doesn't. And I've learned that in the quiet moments, when everything else falls away, sometimes it's the dog that sees clearer than the human ever could." Michael's hands were clenched tight. "So I'm giving you a choice," she said, voice firming. "You can sit in that cell and rot with your shame. Or you can get up, help him heal, help us find what happened to you both. Because this isn't just about the past anymore." She leaned in closer. "This is about what you still owe the dog who didn't run when you burned him." Michael's lips parted just barely. A breath, a sound, the first sign that something inside hadn't fully died. "You still believe I can be that man?" Ilara didn't answer right away. "Then, number he does." She turned and walked out, leaving him in the quiet. A few minutes later, from the hallway, she heard something, the whisper of a word, barely audible. "Blitz!" The courtroom was small, the kind used for minor infractions and custody hearings, but today it held something weightier than any gavel could contain. Snow tapped softly at the windows like a second hand, counting down the moments. A frost-veined silence blanketed the room as Michael Redden sat shackled at the defense table, his wrists trembling slightly against cold steel. He didn't look up. He hadn't since they brought him in. Across the aisle, Nathan stood stiff in uniform. The badge on his chest caught a brief shimmer of light, a reminder of the law, of order. But today, he wasn't here to enforce anything. He was here to ask. Judge Margaret Lorne glanced over the rim of her reading glasses, fingers laced. Her voice, when it came, was crisp but tired. "The charges are severe, Deputy Harrow. Arson, endangerment, negligence involving a federal K-9 asset. You're asking the court to look away?" "No, Your Honor," Nathan said, clearing his throat. "I'm asking the court to look deeper." There were murmurs in the pews behind him. Townspeople, reporters, a few local veterans. Most carried heavy brows. One or two had eyes red from shouting in the streets earlier that week. Nathan continued, voice lower now, like confession. "I served with Sergeant Redden in Kandahar. He was the man who pulled me from the wreckage when half my squad was gone. And the dog he burned." Nathan paused, jaw tightening. "Blitz was the one who dragged him out when a second blast hit. That animal didn't leave him behind, even when fire was licking at his tail." More murmurs. Judge Lorne tilted her head. "And now?" "Now," Nathan said, "I'm watching a man who once stood between me and death sit with eyes like ash, hollow, gone. But he's not gone, not completely. That dog still waits for him, still knows him. And the law, Deputy Harrow?" the judge asked. "It waits for loyalty?" "No, ma'am. It waits for justice. But justice without compassion isn't law. It's vengeance wearing a badge." Michael finally looked up at that. Ilara sat quietly on the bench near the wall. She had said her piece in private. She'd asked for no leniency, only care. Her folded hands now rested over her lap like a prayer unfinished. Nathan stepped forward, holding up a single document, the petition for transfer. I'm requesting temporary placement for Sergeant Michael Redden at the Billings Veterans Recovery Center. 90-day psychiatric evaluation and observation. Not freedom, just a chance. The judge leaned back slowly. And what makes you think he won't run? Or worse, harm himself again? Nathan swallowed. Because if he wanted to die, he wouldn't have called. And he wouldn't have left a trail for Blitz to follow. The words hung in the room like the last leaf of fall fragile, but too stubborn to let go. The prosecutor, a clean-cut man with little room for gray areas, stood. Your Honor, with respect, the state has reviewed Mr. Redden's file. Dishonorable discharge, medical instability, documented risk of violence. The footage speaks for itself. This is not just about PTSD. This is about accountability. We object to any non-custodial outcome. Nathan didn't flinch. I'm not asking for release. I'm asking for recovery. I'm asking for the same mercy we'd give any wounded soldier who forgot how to come home. The judge tapped her pen twice. In the eyes of this court, she said slowly, you're asking us to gamble, to place the safety of others in the hope that redemption still lives in a man who set fire to his own past. She looked to Michael. And what do you say, Sergeant? Michael's throat bobbed. His voice was barely audible. I never meant to hurt him. There was a silence after that, one that felt like it might break something or save it. Judge Lorne sighed and set her gavel down without striking it. Transfer approved, she said quietly. 90-day psychiatric observation under federal watch. Weekly evaluations. No contact with civilians except those authorized. This is not forgiveness, Mr. Redden. This is responsibility, repurposed. A ripple of whispers moved through the room like wind under a closed door. Michael closed his eyes. Ilara's fingers unclenched. Nathan's shoulders fell not in defeat, but in something close to gratitude. Outside, the wind had begun to shift. The snow no longer tapped, it swirled. Two officers approached Michael gently, not pulling, just guiding. And for the first time, he rose without resistance. As they passed by, Blitz, brought in quietly by Ilara, and waiting with her by the door, gave a low whimper. Michael stopped. He didn't speak, just lowered his eyes and nodded, once, to the dog who still hadn't turned away. It was just past dawn when the surgery lights dimmed. Outside the clinic, a soft blanket of frost glistened over the gravel parking lot like shattered glass that had forgotten how to cut. Inside, silence pressed against the walls, the kind that follows a decision no one ever wants to make. Ilara sat at the edge of the surgical room, her scrub shirt streaked with iodine and time. She hadn't changed clothes in 18 hours. Her eyes were red, not just from lack of sleep, but from the way grief lives quietly behind the sternum, unspoken. Blitz lay curled on the heated mat, the stump of his rear leg neatly wrapped in thick gauze. The infection had spread too far. They'd tried everything, irrigation, antibiotics, even hyperbaric treatment. But in the end, the limb had turned against him, and so it had been taken, clean and quick. But the wound wasn't what haunted Ilara. It was the sound he had made when he woke up. Not a cry, not a howl, a breath, like someone surfacing from memory. She checked the IV line one more time, her fingers brushing the edge of his fur still singed near the shoulders. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. You're still here. That's what matters. The room was dim. She didn't turn on the overheads. The only light came from a low lamp near the floor and the morning sun beginning to filter in through the blinds, golden and shy, as if unsure it belonged here. Nathan arrived just after 7 o'clock. He said nothing at first. Just stood in the doorway, hat in his hands, a line drawn deep between his brows. When he finally stepped closer, he didn't ask questions. He just looked. Blitz's breathing was steady, but shallow. His chest rose and fell in the rhythm of a veteran too tired to dream. He made it through? Nathan finally asked. Ilara nodded. By inches, and by choice. You can't teach that kind of will. There was something in her voice. Not pride. Not relief. Something like reverence. Nathan walked over slowly, crouched beside the mat, resting his forearm across one knee. "He's got the heart of 10 men," he said. Blitz's ear twitched, just slightly, barely noticeable. Ilara caught it too. "He's hearing more than we think." They stayed like that for a few moments, the three of them, tangled in quiet, in survival. The air in the room felt heavier than it should. Not oppressive, just sacred. Like whatever this dog had endured hadn't broken him, only carved him into something older. Then came the moment. It started as nothing, just a door opening down the hall. Footsteps, soft, hesitant, and then Michael. The name came in a cracked voice from outside the room. Hesitant, cautious, and Blitz, who hadn't moved in hours, stirred. He didn't leap up. He didn't bark. But his body tensed, not in fear, but recognition. His one front paw pressed into the mat. His ears, both still burned at the edges, perked. "Michael," Nathan said again, gently this time, watching. Blitz turned his head toward the door. And then, slow, painfully slow, he tried to rise. His leg, now gone, betrayed him. He stumbled, collapsed, tried again. A low whine broke from deep inside his chest, not of pain, but insistence. It wasn't about standing. It was about reaching. Ilara dropped to her knees. "Blitz! Easy, don't push it." But he kept trying. The bandage stump dragged. His shoulders trembled. Then a shadow filled the doorway. Michael stood there, gaunt and gray, eyes sunken but wide. His hands were cuffed. They hadn't removed them. Not even now. His escort held his arm gently but firmly, unsure if this was healing or punishment. Blitz didn't care. He made it to a half-sitting position, tail thudding once against the mat. His amber eyes met Michael's like two old wounds recognizing each other. Michael swallowed. "You're still alive," he said. Blitz didn't blink. He didn't need to. Nathan spoke quietly. "He tried to die for you. That's what loyalty looks like after the fire." Michael stepped forward. Just once. Blitz growled. Not a threat, but a cry. It sounded like forgiveness with teeth. "I don't deserve you," Michael said. And still, Blitz stared. Not with judgment, not with blame, but with memory, with love. Ilara stood, wiping her eyes. "Dogs don't care if you deserve it. They love you anyway, even when we can't love ourselves." Michael took another step. His voice broke again. "I broke him." Nathan shook his head. "You didn't break him, Mike. You burned everything around you. But he's still standing. On 3 legs, sure. But he's standing for you. That says more than any apology ever will." Michael knelt. Slowly. The cuffs clinked. Blitz let out one more sound. Not a bark. Not a cry. Just one soft, guttural breath. And then leaned forward until his forehead touched Michael's. Scar to scar. The smell hit her first. Acrid. Sharp. Not just smoke, but something more personal. The kind of burn that clings to memory long after the fire is gone. Ilara pulled into the gravel lot behind the clinic and froze. Ash Creek Animal Recovery had always been modest, a converted house with pale yellow siding and wind chimes that never quite matched. It wasn't much, but it had been safe. For the broken, the abandoned, the four-legged, and the forgotten. But now, it stood violated. Red paint bled down the front windows like open wounds. Crude letters scrawled across the glass screamed in jagged rage. Traitor lover. The back door had been kicked in. Shards of cheap wood hung from rusted hinges. The porch light dangled at an angle, still flickering, trying to be useful. Inside, drawers had been yanked, cabinets left gaping, files scattered like bones. But what stopped Ilara cold was what she found on the floor by the reception desk. A small stuffed elephant, singed, one ear half melted, the tag still intact, property of Lily Ann. It had belonged to a little girl who'd come in last winter, cradling her 3-legged kitten after a snowplow accident. The girl had left the elephant behind, and Ilara had meant to return it. Now it sat amid soot and red spray paint, reeking of gasoline and menace. Her throat tightened. They hadn't just come to scare her. They came to say she didn't belong anymore. Footsteps crunched behind her. She didn't turn, didn't have to. "Nolan," she said softly. The old officer stepped into the light. His uniform was neat, but his eyes looked decades older than his badge. He held his hat in one hand, the other in his coat pocket. He surveyed the room without speaking. Just took it all in, the destruction, the message, the smell of something turned ugly. Finally, he exhaled. This town's lost its warmth. Ilara didn't answer. Her hand shook as she picked up the elephant, brushing ash from its button eye. "Did you see who did it?" she asked, not expecting a real answer. No cameras. They were smart about that. But Nolan crouched near the doorway, squinting at something smeared along the baseboard. Shoe prints size 11. Big. And the paint matches a can I saw on a porch near Sawyer Lane. She looked up. "The Johanssons?" He nodded slowly. "Greg's brother just got back from his 3rd tour. Some folks think you're harboring a domestic terrorist. Others say you're defending a war hero who snapped. Nobody agrees on anything anymore. Not even who deserves to breathe in peace." "Yeah." She set the elephant down gently on the counter. "Michael is not a monster." "I know. Blitz isn't either." "I know that too." Ilara walked to the cabinet where she kept emergency supplies. The door had been torn off, the gauze rolls half unspooled and trampled. It was senseless destruction, not theft, not vandalism for gain. Just hate. Shaken loose by fear. "They didn't even know him," she whispered. Nolan's voice was lower now. "They don't need to. People don't burn what they understand. They burn what scares them." She leaned against the wall, the exhaustion from the past 3 days suddenly crashing into her ribs like surf. It's like the whole town cracked open, and the rot underneath just came pouring out. Nolan didn't argue. He just picked up a bent clipboard and tried, pointlessly, to straighten it. The gesture wasn't about fixing. It was about trying. Outside, voices rose. Not angry. Not now. Curious. Whispers and murmurs from neighbors drawn by the red paint and broken glass. One woman clutched her scarf like it could shield her from the truth. A man across the street crossed himself. Ilara felt the weight of their silence pressing in. She stepped out onto the porch. The wind cut through her coat like glass. A boy, maybe 12, stood at the edge of the property line. His bike lay sideways on the gravel. He didn't move. "You okay?" she called. He blinked. Was it cause of the dog? She nodded once. Honest. Tired. He scratched his head. "My dad says the dog should have been put down." She didn't flinch. "And what do you think?" The boy looked down. "I think if I did something bad, and my dog still loved me, I wouldn't want to lose him too." He picked up his bike and pedaled off without another word. Ilara watched him go, a knot tightening somewhere under her ribs. Not pain, not quite. More like a question with no answer yet. Nolan stepped beside her, his voice quiet. "Some folks are watching to see what you'll do next. Whether you'll run." "I won't," she said. "I know." They stood there, side by side, watching the town exhale. The kind of exhale that came after a betrayal when the mask had dropped and you couldn't pretend anymore. Ash Creek had divided. Some still believed in compassion. Some only believed in control. And some, like Blitz, didn't believe in either. They just remembered. Cold still owned the hours before dawn when the transport van rolled up in front of Ash Creek's stone front courthouse. Its headlights stabbed twin cones through falling sleet, painting the street in a harsh blue that made every snowflake look like shrapnel caught midair. The engine idled low, a restrained growl, like something waiting for permission to break the silence. Inside the lobby, the fluorescent lights felt too bright, too sterile for what was about to happen. Michael Redden sat on a wooden bench, wrists cuffed in front of him, ankles shackled together beneath. He wore a gray government-issue coat over civilian clothes that hung loose on shoulders, gone narrow from months of bad sleep and worse memories. 2 federal marshals flanked him, professionally distant, almost gentle, as though noise itself might reopen whatever wounds weren't visible. Nathan adjusted the collar of his uniform jacket, stepped forward, and crouched until he and Michael were eye level. No metal, no bars between them, just the last few seconds before a road headed east. "Billings is 90 days, Nathan said softly. "Evaluation, meds, group sessions, the works." Michael's eyes, gray and weary, lifted. "And if I fail, then we try again," Nathan answered without hesitation. "Not freedom, just a chance. Remember?" A brief flicker, almost too faint to call a smile, touched the corner of Michael's mouth. "I don't deserve a chance." "Blitz thinks you do," Nathan replied. "I trust him more than most people." A marshal tapped his watch. Time. Nathan rose. The building's glass doors whooshed open, letting in a gust that smelled of snow and gasoline, a scent Ash Creek would take a long time to forget. Out back, Ilara stood beside a large shipping crate set on a rolling dolly. Warm blankets lined the bottom. A portable heater hummed inside, powered by a battery pack. Blitz lay curled against the fleece, bandaged torso rising in shallow, steady breaths. One ear flicked when Ilara whispered his name. His good eye tracked every movement in the half-lit alley. Alert but calm, tranquilized just enough to dull the ache, not enough to dull the heart. The marshals guided Michael down the ramp toward the van. Chains clinked in small, embarrassed notes. He paused when he saw the crate, recognition sparking like a match struck in darkness. Ilara reached through the slats, brushed her fingers over Blitz's unburned cheek, then stepped aside. "He's cleared for light travel," she told the nearest marshal. "He'll ride in Nathan's cruiser behind you, sedation protocol, pain meds on schedule." Nathan appeared, keys in hand. For a moment, the four of them, soldier, handler, veterinarian, cop, formed a silent tableau in breath-white air. No crowd today. After last night's vandalism, Nolan had rerouted patrol cars to keep the angry voices blocks away. This farewell belonged only to those who understood its cost. Michael's cuffed hands tightened. "He shouldn't have to see me like this." Ilara met his gaze, unflinching. "He sees the only part of you that still matters." With a nod from the marshal, Michael climbed into the back of the van. A steel door shut behind him, softly, surprisingly gentle. The engine revved. Exhaust curled upward, ghost gray against pre-dawn sky. Nathan locked Blitz's crate into the cruiser's rear cargo anchors. The dog's head rose. His nostrils flared at the diesel fumes. His tail thumped twice, weak but deliberate. Nathan looked in through the mesh. "Easy, buddy. I'll be right behind him the whole ride." Blitz's gaze shifted toward the idling van, as though measuring distance. Calculation etched into every twitch of whiskers. A deputy swung the courthouse gate open. The van rolled forward, tires crunching over salted snow. Nathan closed the cruiser's hatch. And then it happened. Just as the van eased past the loading dock, Blitz gathered what strength 3 legs and 1 sutured lung could give him. He lifted his head, pressed his muzzle to the crate's slats, and let out a single sound, half bark, half low whine. Soft, resolute. Michael couldn't see him, but inside the van he heard it, the muted echo of a vow only 2 hearts could understand. He leaned toward the small barred window, pressed his forehead to the glass, and whispered a word lost beneath the engine's growl. "Wait." Nathan felt the moment land like a weight on his chest. He slid into the driver's seat, flicked on the headlights, and fell in line behind the van. Snowflakes spun in the beams, tiny white witnesses swirling between past and promise. As the convoy crept onto Route 14, Ilara stood alone in the courtyard, arms wrapped around herself against the cold. The courthouse clock chimed 6 ampere. A hollow note drifting over a town still split between anger and mercy. She watched the red taillights shrink until they were no more than embers in the vast Montana dark. In the crate, Blitz settled back onto the blankets, exhaustion overtaking adrenaline. But his good eye stayed open just long enough to track the faint glow ahead, as if memorizing the path. Because a promise, once given, has a direction, and he intended to follow it broken, scarred, but breathing, until man and dog met again on ground that no longer burned. They lined up before the courthouse doors even opened. Farmers still dusted in feed, shopkeepers with thermoses, veterans in old parkas, and quietly onlookers with phones, ready to record whatever justice would look like today. By 9:30 a.m., courtroom 2 was packed. Every seat filled, people pressed against paneled walls that now seemed too thin to contain the town's anger, grief, or hope. Nathan stood near the front, in dress uniform. Ilara sat beside him, white coat folded neatly. On the far side, Sheriff Locke leaned against a post, snow still clinging to his jacket. Deputy Nolan kept silent watch at the rear. At 10:01, the bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Abigail Whitmore." Judge Whitmore took the bench with silver hair pinned back and eyes like sleet. She looked out over the room, then said quietly, "This is not a trial of guilt. That has already been decided. This is a hearing of mercy, whether a man once shattered can be reshaped into someone useful, or whether the state should shut that door forever. The first case. State of Montana v. Sergeant Michael James Redden. One last chance. Michael entered, flanked by guards. He looked healthier than 90 days ago, but his left hand still trembled. When he saw Nathan and Alara, he nodded. Formal, careful, no assumptions. Prosecutor Dyer stood first. The state recommends continued commitment. Sergeant Redden set fire to a facility, injuring a federal K-9. Public trust has been broken. A few murmurs of agreement rippled from the crowd. The gavel tapped, gentle but firm. Then came the defense. Michael's court-appointed attorney submitted letters from his therapists and Dr. Alara Voss. Sergeant Redden has met every treatment benchmark. More importantly, the primary victim K-9 Blitz has shown consistent positive response during supervised visits. A hush of surprise moved through the crowd. Judge Whitmore looked to Alara. Dr. Voss, please approach. Alara took the stand, hands hiding the tremor born of scrubbing hate off clinic walls the night before. Yes, I performed Blitz's surgeries. Amputation, burns, rehab. He's stable physically. Psychologically, he approaches Sergeant Redden willingly. He wags his tail. And you witnessed this yourself? I did. Forgiveness like that, it's real and rare. Then the judge turned to Nathan. You submitted a plan. Please summarize. Nathan stepped forward. Ash Creek Guardians opens next month. We need experienced handlers. Sergeant Redden would live on site, monitored, continue therapy, and work 40 hours a week training dogs for veterans. Any violation, he goes back. You vouch for this? With my badge and my life. Gasps. A few whispers. Too much grace. And others, maybe not enough. Judge Whitmore paused. Then, mercy is not the absence of consequence. It's consequence shaped toward healing. She granted the petition conditionally. Michael would be transferred to Ash Creek Guardians under tight supervision. As the gavel struck, a soft bark echoed faintly through the courtroom doors. Heads turned. Then came the sound-scraping rubber on oak. The double doors opened. Blitz entered. No handler, no leash. Just Alara walking beside him, her palm hovering near his scarred shoulder. Blitz moved slowly, three-legged but steady. Gasps rose. All eyes followed his limping path until he paused just feet from the defense table. Then his gaze locked on Michael. A long silence. Thump. Blitz's tail wagged. Once. Twice. A sound so soft, it split the courtroom like thunder. Michael choked. His chains clinked as he dropped to his knees. Blitz, he whispered. Blitz whined and stepped forward. Michael's cuffed hands trembled, unsure, until Blitz leaned into them, pressing his muzzle against the metal as if to say, I'm not afraid anymore. Michael broke. I'm so sorry, he sobbed, forehead resting on Blitz's brow. I'm so... But the words dissolved into breathless tears. The courtroom held still, afraid to even blink. Slowly, anger ebbed. A woman wept softly. An old man removed his hat. Judge Whitmore did not strike the gavel. She let the moment unfold. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, you now see mercy in its truest form. Blitz's tail continued to wag. Michael's tears soaked his fur. Nathan swallowed a lump. Alara wiped a tear born not of sadness, but reverence. Court will recess for 15 minutes, the judge finally said. Let hearts compose themselves. No one moved until Blitz leaned back and turned, as if signaling, We've made our peace. He nudged Nathan's knee once on the way out, a quiet thanks. People parted like water, forming a respectful corridor. Michael sat back in his chair, breathing hard. The marshal didn't restrain him. He simply placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Outside, snow fluttered past the windows like confetti, not celebrating a win, but a fragile rebirth. 15 minutes later, the room filled again, but quieter now, softer. The light even seemed gentler. Judge Whitmore resumed her seat. Dr. Voss, she said, you requested time to speak. Alara stepped forward, holding a slim folder. Her voice was clear. Ash Creek is divided, but I don't believe division is the end. She opened the folder. This is a proposal for a nonprofit program, Frost Guardians, a place where broken veterans and broken dogs can heal each other. A murmur of interest spread. We've renovated the old silo off Route 17. 8 beds, 12 rescue dogs, clinical oversight, Virginia partnership. Sergeant Redden would serve as the first mentor. Blitz, when stable, will be the founding canine. She paused. Mercy isn't neutral, but it can be fair. Locking Michael away only deepens the wound. Frost Guardians offers structure, service, and purpose. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small, scorched toy Blitz's stuffed elephant, charred from the clinic arson. Someone tried to burn hope out of us. I'm asking this court to prove them wrong. The judge studied the toy. Then Michael. Sergeant Redden, do you accept this responsibility? I do, Michael said, voice calm. If Blitz still believes in me, I want to be worthy of it. Whitmore leaned back, sleeves folded. The law protects, but it also decides. Today, I decide to let Mercy lead. She signed the order. Frost Guardians would begin. Quarterly court reviews. Zero tolerance policy. Full transparency. The gavel struck not as punishment, but benediction. A sigh moved through the room like spring wind through old leaves. Sunlight pierced the windows. Nathan clapped a hand on Michael's shoulder. Alara closed her eyes in thanks. Even Dyer didn't protest. From the hall came the sound of claws on tile. Blitz waiting, as always, ready to lead. At the edge of Ash Creek, a rusted grain silo stood for decades, abandoned, forgotten, wind whistling through bullet-sized holes. Then the hammers came. In early March, as snow still clung to fence posts, volunteers gathered, veterans in faded uniforms, local carpenters, teenagers with earbuds. Nathan hauled lumber. Ilara laid medical-grade flooring. Michael, his ankle monitor blinking, shoveled out years of rot. Blitz watched from a padded mat, 3 legs steady beneath him, taking inventory of a rising hope. The first blow of a sledgehammer rang out like memory. Rusted panels crashed down, revealing solid beams beneath. Spray-painted lines marked future doors, future windows. What had once been a ruin started to resemble a plan. By May, the silo transformed. Skylights poured golden light across sealed concrete. A circular mezzanine held 8 dorm rooms, orbiting the open center like moons. Each bore a simple plaque, "Here we learn to stay." Below, 12 kennels curved in a crescent. No cages, no bars, tempered glass, rubber floors, and Mozart whispered through sound-dampening panels. Outside, lavender and mint grew in raised beds, meant to ground minds unraveled by war. And on the silo's sunlit south wall, a mural bloomed, a soldier and a German shepherd gazing west toward the mountains. In cobalt letters above them, Frost Guardians, no tagline, just truth. Opening day broke crisp and clean. A banner arched across the entry. Heal together. Stand together. Cars lined the gravel road. Reporters hovered. Protesters were absent. Mercy had replaced fear. Inside, Ilara adjusted her coat. Now embroidered with the Frost Guardians insignia. Paw print over a service star. Nathan checked exits and coffee pots. Michael stood quietly by Kennel 3. Blitz lay beside him, tail thumping once when Nathan approached. "You ready?" Nathan asked. Michael nodded. "Ready to try." Judge Whitmore arrived, not in robe, but in slate-gray coat and quiet presence. She touched the mural like Braille. Nathan stepped to the mic. 6 months ago, this place was hollow. So were some of us. Today, we begin. Ilara followed. We pair broken soldiers with broken dogs, not to save each other, but to survive together. Above them, 8 new residents leaned over the mezzanine rail. Veterans and civilians, each holding a leash. Each leash, a story. Then Judge Whitmore spoke. "I once called this a hearing of mercy. Today, I see its fruit." She unclipped Blitz's leash and pressed it back into Michael's hand. Symbol, benediction. Michael knelt. Blitz licked a tear from his cheek. For the first time since the fire, Michael smiled without apology. Mornings at Frost Guardians began in silence. No whistles, no reveille. Just the shuffle of paws on rubber flooring and the hum of radiant heat through concrete bones. At dawn, Blitz patrolled 3 legs, carrying him from kennel to kennel. He paused at each, offering stillness until the dog inside stopped trembling. No bark, no command, just presence. By 7 a.m., the center stirred. Sergeant Ramirez shuffled in, notebook in hand, dreams still clinging to her socks. She greeted Blitz like a morning prayer and joined the kitchen where Dion Wright stirred oatmeal with a prosthetic hand. Jonah Blake arrived next, eyes hollow, kibble in hand for Luna, the anxious husky with barbed wire scars. He waited for Blitz to lie nearby before unlocking her kennel. Trust moved in tandem now. In the corner, Ilsa Navarro brewed coffee with twitching fingers. Blitz approached, a nose to her elbow, soft and sure. She sighed, poured 2 mugs. Just outside, in the quiet room, children arrived. Grief, shadowed, small, quiet. Blitz would choose the one curled farthest from the circle. No coaxing, he'd simply lie nearby until their fingers found the soft place behind his ear. That's when the counselor said, "The room exhales." Group PT began at 9 o'clock. No rank, no uniforms. Veterans and rescue dogs moved in sync. Michael counted reps. Blitz barked every 3rd number. Laughter followed, like warm wind stirring dry fields. Afternoons rotated. Therapy upstairs, canine workshops outside. Blitz attended them all. Sometimes he participated. Sometimes he simply existed, a steady metronome beneath people learning to breathe again. One afternoon, Ilsa guided Blitz through a maze of cones. No leash, no voice. Her hand shook. Michael said, "Let him read you." She did. Blitz followed every quiver. At the end, she laughed, alive again. At dusk, the silo glowed under string lights. Stories were shared, only feelings, not details. Jonah finally spoke of the tattooed coordinates on his arm, his brother's last patrol. His voice cracked. Luna pressed close. Blitz rested against his shin. Michael closed each day with the mantra, "We carry each other forward. We leave no soul behind." Blitz barked once. The room exhaled. Saturday afternoons were reserved for family. No forms, no diagnoses. Just cocoa, games, and the slow mending of invisible wounds. On one such Saturday, sleet tapped the skylights like polite applause. Inside, a boy of 7 arrived with his mother. Leo Reed, small, serious, wearing a too big coat and cautious eyes. Michael greeted them. "Doc Ramirez is expecting you." From the mezzanine came Mason Reed, Leo's father, recently saved from the edge. Blitz had found him in a garage, muzzle of a pistol trembling in his lap. Blitz had crawled beneath his arms, had stayed. Now Mason stood before his son. Blitz, by the stove, lifted his head. One ear perked. He limped forward, slow and deliberate. Stopped just shy of Leo. "May I?" Leo whispered. His mother nodded, hands trembling. Leo crouched. Blitz lowered his head. Leo traced the scars. "Does it still hurt?" Blitz blinked. Not anymore. Leo's small hands touched the blue sleeve covering the missing leg. "Is this the dog?" Mason swallowed. "Yes, buddy. That's Blitz." Leo leaned in. "He saved my dad." The room held still. Cocoa steamed between forgotten fingers. Then Leo whispered, "We can be a team." Blitz's tail thumped. 1, 2, 3 agreement signed. Ilara, watching, spoke softly. "There's a kennel in your suite, Mason. Tonight can be a trial." Mason's eyes welled. "Thank you." Leo's smile broke open the room's silence. Blitz settled beside him, nose in Leo's lap. From the corner, Nathan whispered to Michael, "Somebody's on duty." Leo looked up. "He's not on duty. He's just here." "Sometimes," Nathan said. "That's the hardest job." Outside, snowflakes spun slow. The mural shimmered. Frost Guardians still burned blue. Inside, Leo asked, "Dad, does saving someone hurt?" Mason pulled him close. "Sometimes. But the hurting ends. The saving stays." Blitz thumped his tail again. And in that quiet room, warmed by fire, stories, and slow forgiveness, healing spread. From one boy, one man, one dog, forward, together. The first snow of December fell gently over Frost Guardians, just a hush of white confetti swirling on a breeze scented with pine and wood smoke. In front of the newly raised flagpole, a crowd gathered. Veterans in caps, ranchers in denim, children bundled in puffy coats. Steam curled from travel mugs. Anticipation hung in the air. Nathan adjusted the mic, then stepped back for Ilara, who held a folded program in trembling hands. Michael stood behind her, his old uniform replaced with the green canvas jacket worn by Guardian mentors. At his side, Blitz, three-legged but proud, sat like a sentinel carved from loyalty. A hush fell as Judge Abigail Whitmore approached. "We gather," she began, "to dedicate more than a plaque. We honor this ground once marked by pain, now seeded with hope." Nathan revealed the plaque beneath navy cloth. Polished bronze caught the light. It read, "If you survive, plant the pain. Let it grow. T.H. Guardian Letter. 2011. Ilara's breath caught. Those were Thomas Hawke's words, her fiancé, whose farewell note had sparked the creation of Frost Guardians. She reached out, fingers grazing the plaque as if greeting him. Nathan spoke again. "Many know the story, a burned dog and a broken soldier who helped each other heal. But you may not know Thomas's words inspired it all. Today, they belong to every survivor who came home feeling less than whole." Blitz rose. Snow dusted his muzzle. With steady steps, he moved to the flagpole and sat, eyes fixed on the horizon. Leo and his father, Mason, brought the American flag. Mason's hands trembled. Together, they clipped the flag and raised it skyward. The wind unfurled its colors just as a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, gilding the fabric with gold. A lone bugler played taps. Notes floated in the still air, binding the crowd in reverence. Some wept. Even children stood silent. Ilara stepped forward. "Thomas believed pain could be planted, like wheat, and grown into something that feeds. Frost Guardians is that field. Every scar here, animal or human, has roots. But we choose what grows from them. Sorrow or shelter." She looked to Blitz. "Our sentinel reminds us." Then came the tree planting, a sapling pine, ash-gray soil, a quiet murmur, pain. Then darker loam, growth. Michael stepped forward with a scorched dog tag Blitz's. He hung it on a low branch. It clinked gently, like the first leaf of a new season. Nathan closed, voice clear. "This ground belongs to every survivor, two-legged, four-legged, or otherwise. May the plaque remind us, surviving isn't enough. We must grow from what tried to burn us." Blitz barked once deep. "Sure." Ilara knelt beside him. "Good boy," she whispered. "Stand watch." And he did, even as the crowd drifted, some to Coco, some to quiet hugs, some to trace the bronze words. Blitz stayed. Snow gathered on his fur. He didn't move. Near the mural, artist Amelia Reyes wiped a tear. "Perfect," she whispered. When the last visitor left and twilight blanketed Ash Creek in soft lavender, Blitz finally curled beside the stone. He slept not out of weariness, but trust. Another would take the next watch. After all, a sentinel rests in moments, not hours, and this sacred ground would remember. Ahead stretched the tree line, a ragged wall of ponderosa pines and aspen skeletons silhouetted against the last pale blush of sunset. Somewhere beyond those trees lay the abandoned gas station where fire once tried to write a different ending for him. Most dogs would avoid such a place, memories etched in scent and flame. Yet Blitz faced the woods without a tremor. His tail rested, neither tucked nor wagging, simply still. The posture of a soldier at ease rather than alert. He inhaled, nostrils sifting winter scents. Resin carried off the pines. Smoke from Nathan's cabin farther up the ridge. The faint musk of deer bedding down beyond the creek. No gasoline, no terror, just wilderness. Breathing slow under snow. Behind him, the new flag clinked softly against its halyard metal on metal. A calm pulse. The young pine planted at the memorial shivered as flakes collected on its needles. The dog tag hanging from the lowest branch chimed a delicate note when wind bumped it against bark. Each sound tied present to past without dragging it backward. Blitz's gaze traced the horizon. To the west, the Absaroka Range wore its evening violets, peaks fading into cloud like shoulders sinking into quilts. The sky above them held one bright star, first of night, shimmering with the timid confidence of something newly born. It mirrored the gleam in Blitz's lone good eye. Not firelight, not fearlight, calm, contemplative, alive. Footsteps crunched down the path. Michael approached, hands thrust into jacket pockets. breath curling in pale ribbons. He stopped a respectful distance, following Blitz's line of sight toward the darkening forest. "Thought I'd find you out here," he murmured. Blitz flicked an ear, did not turn. Michael followed his gaze to the shadows that had once held so much pain. He exhaled slowly. "You checking for ghosts?" He paused, biting back an ironic grin. "Or making sure they don't get lonely?" Snowflakes clung to Blitz's whiskers. He blinked them away, then resumed watch, chest expanding with a measured breath. Michael stepped beside him, their shoulders nearly touching. Funny, isn't it? Same trees, same road, same cold. But everything's changed. He rubbed gloved fingers over the faint burn scars along Blitz's neck. "You trust it now. Or maybe you trust yourself inside it." The shepherd leaned not fully, just enough to anchor Michael's words to shared ground. They stood quietly, the world settling around them like soft ash after a long battle has finally burned out. Wind shifted, carrying echo of children's laughter from the quiet room. Leo cajoling Luna through a makeshift obstacle course of beanbags. A single bark high, joyful rolled across the yard, bounced against silo walls, and hushed into the trees. Blitz's tail lifted, thumped once against Michael's pant leg, acknowledgement of distant comrades. Michael smiled. "You hear that? Sounds like the next generation already taking the watch." A beat later, another set of footsteps approached lighter, crunching quick. Nathan jogged up, breath fogging. He carried a thermos in one hand. "There you are. Cocoa Patrol making rounds," he said, offering the cup to Michael, then crouching to scratch Blitz behind the ear. "Didn't want the VIP Sentinel freezing on duty." Steam spiraled as Michael unscrewed the lid. Cinnamon and chocolate sweetened the air. Blitz sniffed appreciatively. Nathan laughed. "Sorry, buddy. Vet orders no sugar." Blitz returned to scanning the horizon, but the calm had deepened. The low-lying creek gurgled beneath ice farther down the property. Coyotes yipped from the distant ridge, their chorus answered by a ranch dog's authoritative bark. None of it unsettled him. Nathan followed the shepherd's gaze. "He's still staring at that place?" Michael nodded. "But it's different now. It's like he's making peace with geography." Nathan's tone softened. "We all need to know the scars on the map can't hurt us anymore." A hush, settled, comfortable as wool. Snow fell thicker, clinging to Blitz's back until his coat stippled white. He didn't shake it off. Instead, he sat, weight shifting smoothly over his remaining haunch, posture straight as a monument. He resembled Amelia's mural dog and soldier, both facing mountains, yet in living form, the image breathed hope through every slow blink. Michael sipped cocoa. Sweet warmth spread through him. Milk, sugar, a pinch of chili Alara liked to add for courage. He looked down at Blitz. "You ready to head in?" Blitz didn't budge. Nathan chuckled. "He'll go when he's finished." Sentinel's privilege. Michael nodded, stepping back. "Take your time, partner." He and Nathan returned toward the silo, their figures swallowed by lamplight near the entrance. Alone again, Blitz watched the tree line. Somewhere in that darkness lay ashes of memory, but they no longer smoldered. Snow had cooled them, and time had turned them fertile. Beneath bark and root slept a seed of forgiveness, humming with potential. He tipped his head slightly, ears tasting air. No danger, no threat, only the hush of a world learning to breathe gentler. With one last look at the horizon, mountains now nearly invisible behind gauzy snowfall, Blitz rose. He shook, scattering snowflakes like tiny shooting stars, and trotted toward the warm circle of lights where voices mingled and laughter braided with the music of clinking mugs. Each footfall left a single three-point imprint on fresh snow, a signature of survival. And behind him, woods and fire and fear stayed where they belonged. In the distance, in the past, powerless against a heart that had chosen calm over memory's smoke. The horizon remained, but now it promised beginnings, not endings. Night drifted over Ash Creek in layers, first a pale mauve that kissed the mountains, then a violet hush that tucked itself between spruce boughs, and at last a velvet black trimmed in frost. In the yard of Frost Guardians, solar sconces cast small halos on the snow, lighting a path back to the silo door. Nathan walked that path alone, hands buried in his coat pockets, listening to the crunch of his boots and the slow rhythm of his own breath. Blitz padded beside him, head level with Nathan's thigh. Each footfall left 3 clean impressions, The missing fourth, no longer an absence, but a signature. A soft wind carried cedar and distant wood smoke. It mussed Nathan's hair, but Blitz merely blinked into it, scarred ears, catching secrets only dogs can keep. They stopped at the flagpole, where morning ceremony had felt like a heartbeat, loud enough to stir the dead. The flag snapped once in the nocturnal breeze, then settled against the pole's shadow. The sapling pine, its needles dusted white, stood guard over Thomas Hawke's bronze words. Nathan read them again in the lantern glow. If you survive, plant the pain. Let it grow. His throat tightened. For months he had poured muscle and marrow into making those words truth, but only tonight did he feel their roots anchoring deep. Blitz sat, nostrils sampling air. The world was quiet. The kind of quiet Nathan remembered from deserts just before dawn firefights. The kind that hummed, "Something's coming." Yet here the hush felt benevolent, like a quilt laid gently over a sleeping child. Nathan exhaled. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think miracles came with trumpets and light, big gestures." He chuckled, breath steaming. "Turns out sometimes miracles limp through the snow on 3 legs, wearing scars like armor." And Blitz turned his head, good eye fixed on him, tail brushing the snow in a slow, deliberate sweep. In that thrum of fur against flake, Nathan heard affirmation, "Yes, yes, keep going." He knelt, knees dimpling cold powder, and let his gloved hand rest on Blitz's chest, feeling the steady thud beneath singed fur. "You pulled me out of a grave I didn't even know I dug," he whispered. "Pulled Michael out, too. And look at us now." His voice cracked with a half-laugh. "Planting gardens in an old silo? Who'd have thought?" The dog's tail kept its rhythm. Not frantic, not playful, just certain. Nathan tilted his head back to the sky. Stars pricked through clouds in shy clusters. Faint, but gathering courage. Behind him, the silo windows glowed gold. Mason reading to Leo in the quiet room, Ilsa brewing nighttime tea, Jonah tapping coordinates into a GPS app for tomorrow's sled hike with Luna. Life. Ordinary and extraordinary. Unfurling like pine cones in fire's aftermath. "Forward," Nathan murmured, not command, but observation. He'd spent years wearing grief like rank, marching in place. Tonight he realized he was moving again, and had been ever since Blitz's charred body refused to die. The door creaked open behind them. Alara stepped out, wool shawl over her shoulders. "I figured I'd find you two here," she said, voice gentler than the night. Nathan rose, brushing snow from his knees. "Couldn't sleep." Alara smiled, the kind that knew why without asking. She crouched, scratched Blitz under the chin. "Neither could he. Guard shift, I suppose." Blitz leaned into her touch, tail tapping quicker now, a percussion of gratitude. Alara straightened, eyes glinting in starlight. "Come inside. Coco's still warm." "In a minute," Nathan said. Then quieter, "I need to say goodbye." She didn't question, simply nodded and slipped back through the door, leaving them to the silence, to the stars, to the raw edge where past and future shake hands. Nathan faced Blitz again. "Tomorrow you start certified therapy dog rounds," he reminded, tone teasing. "Hospice, high school stress labs, big schedule, hero." Blitz chuffed, almost a laugh, and nudged Nathan's hip with his muzzle. "Yeah, I know," Nathan answered the unspoken. "You've got this. He looked once more toward the woods, the place where flames once licked at fur and fate. Snow lay unbroken there, now clean, untouched, glimmering beneath moonlight. Not erasure, but renewal. Nathan inhaled, filling his lungs with cold that felt like medicine. "Let's go home," he whispered. As they turned toward the silo, Blitz's tail gave one final wag, broad, unhurried, a punctuation mark on a story neither fire nor fear had managed to finish. He did not look back at the tree line. He did not limp with uncertainty. He walked beside Nathan, matching him stride for purposeful stride. Not walking away, walking forward. Some bonds don't need words. A wag of the tail, a quiet nudge when your world feels too heavy. A pair of eyes that sees you not just who you are, but who you've always tried to be. That's the quiet kind of loyalty a dog gives, and no breed knows that better than the German Shepherd. If this story stirred something in you, reminded you of a dog you loved, or the one resting at your feet right now, you're not alone. These animals aren't just companions. They carry our fears, our hopes, sometimes even our healing. If you've ever wanted to build a deeper connection with your own dog, or simply understand them a little better, there's a wonderful place I've come across. It's not flashy or loud, just a heartfelt resource for people who believe, like I do, that love grows in the quiet moments. You can take a look if it feels right. And if nothing else, maybe today's the day you give your pup an extra minute of your time. You might be surprised what they've been waiting to give back.